The gunshot split the air before Clara could scream. She didn't know the rugged stranger who threw himself between her and the bullet, didn't know why he'd risk everything for a woman he'd never met. But in that single, breathless moment, as his body shielded hers and chaos exploded around them, her entire life changed direction. What she didn't know then was that he would return. Every single day. Not to claim her gratitude, not to ask for anything in return, but to leave letters in the shadows, words that would rebuild her broken world one sentence at a time. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this tale travels across the world. The stagecoach lurched to a stop in a cloud of dust so thick Clara Bennett could taste the grit between her teeth. She pressed a gloved hand to the window, peering through the haze at what was supposed to be her future. Red Hollow, Montana Territory, population 200 and declining. It looked like God had forgotten it existed. Wooden buildings leaned against each other like drunken gamblers, their paint peeled by wind and sun until the grain showed through like exposed bone. The main street, if it could be called that, was a rutted path of dried mud, horseshoe prints fossilized into the earth. Somewhere a door banged rhythmically on loose hinges, keeping time with Clara's racing heart. "Red Hollow!" the driver shouted, his voice rough as the landscape. "End of the line, miss!" End of the line. The words felt prophetic. Clara gathered her carpet bag and the leather satchel that contained everything she owned. 3 dresses, her mother's cameo brooch, a daguerreotype of parent she barely remembered, and the letter from Thaddeus Blackwood, attorney at law, informing her that her Uncle George had died and left her his general store. A store she'd never seen in a town she'd never visited, inherited from an uncle she'd met exactly twice in her 23 years. The driver yanked open the door. An October wind rushed in, colder than anything Clara had known in Philadelphia. She stepped down carefully, her button-up boots finding purchase on the wooden step. The hem of her traveling dress, deep burgundy wool, practical but fine, dragged through the dust, and she knew immediately that everything she'd brought was wrong for this place. "McGinty's Hotel is that way," the driver said, pointing to a 2-story structure that looked slightly less likely to collapse than its neighbors. "General store's the other direction, past the bank. Can't miss it, only one with the windows still intact." The bitterness in his voice suggested this was meant as a compliment. "Thank you," Clara said, but he was already hauling her trunk from the boot, setting it down with a thud that sent up another plume of dust. She stood alone in the street as the stagecoach rattled away, suddenly and completely aware that she was the only woman visible in the entire town. Men watched from the shadows of covered walkways, watched with the unsettling intensity of wolves sizing up prey. She lifted her chin, squared her shoulders, and started walking toward the hotel. A mistake. She should have gone directly to the attorney's office. Should have stayed on the stagecoach. Should have sold the store site unseen and returned to Philadelphia, to her position as a seamstress, to the small room above Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, where at least she knew the rules. But here she was, dragging a trunk through Red Hollow's main street, watched by men whose faces were as weathered and unreadable as the landscape itself. The bank sat on the corner like a squat toad, its false front painted with bold letters, Red Hollow, Savings and Loan. Stunt, 1872. Clara paused in front of it, setting down her trunk to rest her burning arms. Through the window she could see the interior, a clerk behind an iron cage, a few customers conducting business, the ordinary rhythm of commerce. Then the ordinary shattered. 3 men exploded from the bank's entrance, their faces hidden behind bandanas, their arms loaded with canvas sacks. The first one out fired his pistol into the air, a sharp crack that sent Clara's heart into her throat. "Nobody move!" he shouted. "First person follows us dies." Time became strange, elastic. Clara saw the gunman's eyes above the bandana, pale, cold, with the flat affect of a man who'd killed before. Saw the in-hind clerk stumbling out behind them, blood streaming from his temple. Saw people scattering, diving for cover, the street erupting into chaos. She couldn't move. Her body had turned to stone, rooted to the spot by pure terror. The second robber swung toward her, his gun rising. "You, get down!" Clara's legs wouldn't obey. She stood frozen, a perfect target, her mind screaming at her body to move, move, move. Then someone grabbed her. Hard hands seized her shoulders and yanked her backward with such force that her feet left the ground. She gasped, inhaled dust and leather and sweat, and then she was falling, the world tilting sideways. Her back hit something solid, not the ground, but a body, a man's chest, and they crashed together against the wall of the bank. Gunfire erupted. Not one shot, but a volley, bullets punching through the air where she'd been standing a heartbeat earlier. Wood splintered above her head. Glass shattered. Someone screamed. The man who'd grabbed her, she couldn't see his face, only knew he was large, solid, impossibly strong, covered her body entirely with his own. One arm wrapped around her waist, pinning her against him. The other hand pressed her head down, tucking her face against his shoulder. "Don't move," he said. His voice was low, rough, but not unkind. "Don't even breathe loud." Clara couldn't have moved if she'd wanted to. She was trapped between the wall and this stranger, her nose pressed against sun-warmed cotton, her hands clutching at his shirt without conscious thought. She could feel his heart beating against her cheek, steady, unhurried, as if being caught in a gunfight was just another Tuesday. More shots. Hoofbeats thundering past, so close she felt the vibration through the wall, shouting, men returning fire now, the whole town erupting into violence. The stranger's grip tightened. "Stay down." Then he was moving, shifting his weight, and Clara realized with horror that he was putting himself between her and the street, using his own body as a shield. She tried to protest, tried to push him away, but he was immovable, a wall of muscle and bone standing between her and death. Something tugged at his shirt near her hand. She felt him flinch, just slightly, a barely perceptible tension, but he didn't move, didn't cry out. The gunfire was fading now, the hoofbeats receding into the distance. Men were shouting, organizing a posse. Someone called for the doctor. The ordinary sounds of aftermath, of survival and counting the dead. Only then did the stranger ease back slightly, giving Clara room to breathe. She looked up at him for the first time. He was tall. She'd known that from the way he'd lifted her like she weighed nothing, with broad shoulders and sun-darkened skin. His hat had fallen off in the chaos, revealing dark hair that needed cutting and a face that looked carved from the same granite as the mountains beyond town. Strong jaw, straight nose, lips pressed into a grim line. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. Blue. Not the pale blue of summer sky, but deep blue, the color of twilight, with shadows in them that spoke of things he'd seen and wished he hadn't. They were fixed on her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle, not from fear, but from something she couldn't name. "You hurt?" he asked. Clara shook her head, not trusting her voice. She was still pressed against him, still clutching his shirt, still breathing in the scent of leather and sage and something uniquely him. "Good." He released her carefully, as if she might shatter, and stepped back. His movements were economical, controlled, the movements of a man accustomed to violence. That's when Clara saw the blood. It soaked through his shirt just above his left hip, a spreading darkness against the faded blue fabric. The bullet that had tugged at his shirt hadn't missed. It had gone through him. "You're shot," she gasped. We need to get you to a doctor." "It's nothing." He bent to retrieve his hat, and Clara saw him wince, saw the tightness around his mouth that betrayed his words. "Grazed me, that's all." "That's not a graze, that's—" "Ma'am." He settled his hat on his head, and the shadow of the brim hid those devastating eyes. "You should get off the street, not safe." "You saved my life," Clara said. The words came out shakier than she wanted, emotion bleeding through. "You threw yourself in front of bullets for me. I don't even know your name." For a long moment, he just looked at her. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition, or regret. Then he touched the brim of his hat in a gesture so old-fashioned it seemed to belong to a different century entirely. "No need for names," he said quietly. "Just be more careful, miss. This isn't Philadelphia." He turned and walked away before she could ask how he knew where she was from. His gait was even, unhurried, no sign that he was bleeding except for the dark stain spreading across his shirt. Clara watched him disappear around the corner, past the scattered crowd now tending to the wounded bank clerk, past the men mounting horses to chase the robbers. He never looked back. "Miss Bennett?" Clara turned to find a small, balding man in a suit hurrying toward her, his face flushed with exertion and concern. "Miss Clara Bennett?" he repeated. "I'm Thaddeus Blackwood. I've been expecting you, though not under such dramatic circumstances." He glanced at the chaos around them, at the bullet holes in the bank's wall, at the blood on the street. "Are you injured?" "No," Clara said. "Thanks to—" She trailed off, gesturing toward where the stranger had disappeared. "Who was that man, the one who— "Which one?" Blackwood asked, following her gaze. "Tall, dark hair, blue eyes. He was wearing a—" Clara stopped. "How did you describe someone when all you'd really seen were his eyes?" "He saved my life. Took a bullet for me." Blackwood's expression shifted, something between sympathy and caution. "Could have been any number of men, Miss Bennett. We have quite a few cowboys passing through. Now, if you'll permit me, I think we should get you somewhere safe and discuss your uncle's estate. This is hardly the welcome I'd hoped to provide." But Clara wasn't listening. She was staring at the corner where the stranger had vanished, at the trail of blood drops he'd left in the dust, dark as garnets in the afternoon sun. She had come to Red Hollow to claim a store, to start over, to escape the suffocating propriety of Philadelphia, where eligible men saw her as a charity case and her prospects had narrowed to spinsterhood or marriage to someone she couldn't respect. Instead, she'd been welcomed by gunfire and saved by a ghost. But Blackwood's office was above the barber shop, reached by an exterior staircase that Clara climbed with shaking legs. The adrenaline was leaving her system now, replaced by exhaustion and the delayed shock of almost dying. Her hands trembled as she removed her gloves. The office was small but neat, smelling of paper and pipe tobacco. Blackwood gestured to a chair across from his desk, already covered with documents. "Before we begin," Clara said, sitting carefully, "I need to know something. The man who saved me, is there a way to find out who he was? I should thank him. He was injured because of me." Blackwood sighed, settling into his own chair. "Miss Bennett, Red Hollow is a frontier town. Many of our residents prefer anonymity. Some are running from things, others are simply private. If the man wished to be thanked, he would have given you his name." "That's not—" "Let it go," Blackwood said, not unkindly. "Trust me on this. Now shall we discuss your inheritance?" Clara wanted to argue, but something in the attorney's expression stopped her. She nodded. Blackwood opened a folder and withdrew a sheaf of papers. "Your uncle, George Bennett, died 6 weeks ago of heart failure. He was 61 years old, had no wife, no children, and named you as his sole heir. His estate consists primarily of the general store on Main Street, along with the inventory therein and the building itself. He also had a small savings account, though I'm afraid much of that has gone to settling his debts." "Debts?" Clara's heart sank. "How much?" "The store was struggling," Blackwood admitted. "Your uncle was a good man, but not a businessman. He extended credit too freely, ordered inventory that didn't sell, let the building fall into disrepair. The good news is that he owned the property outright, no mortgage. The bad news is that the store hasn't turned a profit in over 2 years." Clara felt the familiar weight settling onto her shoulders, the same weight she'd carried in Philadelphia when Mrs. Henderson raised her rent. When clients stopped coming because Clara refused to compromise her integrity, when every month became a calculation of which bills to pay and which to defer. She'd traveled 1,500 miles to start over, and she was right back where she'd started, broke and alone. "What do you recommend?" she asked. Blackwood hesitated. "Honestly, sell. I have a buyer who's willing to take the property for a fair price. You could return to Philadelphia with enough money to live comfortably for a year or two while you find a position." "And if I stay?" "Then you'll work yourself to the bone trying to make that store profitable, competing against the trading post that undercuts every price, fighting the reputation your uncle built for being too soft, dealing with suppliers who won't extend credit because of his debts." Blackwood leaned forward. "Miss Bennett, I knew your uncle. He was a kind man, but kindness doesn't pay bills on the frontier." Clara looked down at her hands, at the calluses from years of needlework, at the ink stains that never quite washed off her fingers. She thought of Philadelphia, of the life she'd left behind, the boarding house, the endless sewing, the slow suffocation of a future that held nothing but more of the same. Then she thought of blue eyes in a face carved from stone, of a man who'd taken a bullet for a stranger and walked away without asking for gratitude. In Philadelphia, no one risked anything for anyone else. Certainly not for her. "I'll stay," she said. Blackwood's eyebrows rose. "Miss Bennet." "I'll stay," Clara repeated, firmer now. "Show me the store. Show me the books. Show me everything. I've come this far. I'm not turning back without trying." Something like respect flickered across the attorney's face. "Very well. Though I should warn you, the store is in worse condition than you might expect. Your uncle's health was failing for months before he died. He couldn't maintain it properly." "I understand. And Red Hollow can be unwelcoming to outsiders, especially women running businesses alone. I've dealt with unwelcoming before." Blackwood studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I believe you have. All right, Miss Bennet. Tomorrow morning, I'll take you to the store and walk you through the inventory. For tonight, I've arranged a room for you at McGinty's hotel. It's not fancy, but it's clean and safe." Clara stood, gathering her gloves. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood." "One more thing." He rose as well, reaching into his desk drawer. "Your uncle left this for you. He wrote it 3 days before he died, when he knew the end was coming." He handed Clara a sealed envelope, her name written across it in shaky handwriting. She took it carefully, feeling the weight of it, the finality. "I'll leave you to read it in private," Blackwood said. "The hotel is just down the street. Mrs. McGinty is expecting you." Clara's room at the hotel was small, but as promised, clean. A narrow bed with a quilt that had seen better days. A washstand with a chipped pitcher and basin. A single window overlooking the street, already dark as night fell across Red Hollow. She lit the oil lamp and sat on the bed, holding her uncle's letter. Her hands were steady now, the shock worn off, replaced by the same grim determination that had gotten her through the last 5 years alone in Philadelphia. She broke the seal and unfolded the paper. "My dear Clara, if you're reading this, I'm dead, and you're in Red Hollow, wondering what the hell I was thinking leaving you a failing business in a town that God forgot. Fair question. Truth is, I didn't have anyone else. Your mother was my only sister, and when she died, you were just a girl. I should have done more for you then. I should have brought you here, raised you proper, but I was a coward, and by the time I realized it, you were grown and I was dying. The store isn't much. Maybe it's nothing, but it's yours, free and clear, and that's more than most folks have in this world. What you do with it is up to you. Sell it if you want. Lord knows I wouldn't blame you, but if you stay, if you decide to make a go of it, then you should know something. Red Hollow is hard country. It makes you hard or it breaks you. But there are good people here, buried under all that hardness. Find them, trust them, let them help you, even when your pride says not to. And Clara, don't be like me. Don't wait until you're dying to start living. Take risks, make mistakes, let people in, even when it scares you, especially when it scares you. Your loving uncle, George. Clara read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and tucked it into her satchel. Her eyes were burning, but she didn't cry. She'd learned years ago that tears accomplish nothing. Instead, she walked to the window and looked out at Red Hollow's dark street. A few lights burned in windows. Somewhere a piano played badly. The wind rattled the loose shutters and sent dust devils spinning through the darkness. This was her inheritance. A dying store in a dying town in a territory so far from civilization it might as well be the moon. And yet, she pressed her hand to the window, feeling the cold glass against her palm. Somewhere out there in the darkness, a man was nursing a bullet wound because he'd chosen to save her life. A stranger who'd asked for nothing, expected nothing, and disappeared without even giving his name. "Don't wait until you're dying to start living," her uncle had written. Clara stood at the window for a long time, watching Red Hollow sleep, thinking about the future she'd left behind and the one she was choosing. Thinking about a man with blue eyes and secrets whose blood still stained the street below. She didn't know his name, didn't know if she'd ever see him again. But for the first time in 5 years, she felt something besides resignation. She felt alive. The night passed slowly. Clara slept in fits and starts, jerking awake at every sound. Footsteps in the hall, voices from the saloon, the wind battering the building. In Philadelphia, She'd grown accustomed to noise, to the constant rumble of the city. But Red Hollow's sounds were different, wilder, speaking a language she didn't yet understand. When pale light finally filtered through the window, Clara rose and washed with cold water from the pitcher. She had 3 dresses in her trunk, all designed for Philadelphia's drawing rooms and shop floors. She chose the most practical, a dark blue cotton with minimal trim, high collar, long sleeves. Armor against the world. In the mirror above the washstand, she looked the same as always. Dark brown hair pulled back in a severe knot, gray eyes too large and a face too thin, mouth that never quite learned to smile on command. Not pretty, not ugly, just ordinary. Forgettable. Except she couldn't forget those blue eyes watching her with an intensity that felt like being seen for the first time in her life. She shook off the thought and went downstairs to the hotel's dining room, where Mrs. McGinty served breakfast, eggs fried in bacon grease, biscuits that could have been used as ammunition, coffee strong enough to strip paint. Clara ate mechanically, aware of the stares from other diners, all men, all watching her with varying degrees of curiosity and suspicion. "You're the Bennett girl," Mrs. McGinty said, refilling Clara's coffee cup. She was a large woman with iron gray hair and sharp eyes. "George's niece from back east." "Yes, ma'am." "Heard about the trouble yesterday. Bank robbery. Shame you had to see that on your first day." Mrs. McGinty's eyes narrowed shrewdly. "Heard something else, too. Heard Caleb Rowan got himself shot pulling some fool Eastern girl out of the line of fire." Clara's cup froze halfway to her lips. "Caleb Rowan? So it was you." Mrs. McGinty nodded, satisfied. "Thought so. Girl matching your description, standing in the street like a target. Caleb bleeding all over Doc Preston's office afterward. Don't see him in town much, so it made an impression." "Is he all right?" Claire asked urgently. "The wound. He said it was just a graze, but there was so much blood. He'll live. Takes more than a bullet to kill that one. Been through worse and came out standing." Mrs. McGinty studied Clara with unnerving directness. "You planning to thank him proper?" "I would if I could find him. Where does he live?" "Out past Eagle Ridge, about 2 hours' ride north. Has a ranch out there, though ranch might be overstating it. More like he has some land and a house and doesn't want company." Mrs. McGinty's expression softened slightly. "Word of advice, Miss Bennett. Caleb Rowan isn't the kind of man who wants thanks. He did what he did because it needed doing, not because he expected anything from you. Best way to honor that is to let it lie." It was the second time someone had told her to let it go. Clara's jaw tightened. "He took a bullet for me." "He's taken bullets before. He'll take them again." Mrs. McGinty turned away to tend to another customer, the conversation clearly over. Clara sat alone, staring into her coffee, turning the name over in her mind. Caleb Rowan. At least now she could put a name to the face, to those haunted blue eyes, to the man who disappeared into the aftermath without asking for gratitude. But knowing his name only made the mystery deeper. Why would a reclusive rancher, a man who apparently avoided town and company, risk his life for a stranger? What had Mrs. McGinty meant by "he's been through worse"? Clara wanted answers. But more than that, she wanted to see him again, to look into those eyes and understand what she'd glimpsed there in that moment of crisis. The shadows, the pain, the unexpected gentleness in the way he'd held her. She finished her coffee and went to meet Blackwood. Oaktown. The store was worse than Clara had imagined. Located on Main Street between the hardware store and an abandoned building with broken windows, Bennett's General Goods looked like it had been slowly giving up for years. The painted sign was faded and peeling, barely legible. The front window, the one the stagecoach driver had mentioned was still intact, was so covered with dust it might as well have been frosted glass. Blackwood unlocked the door, which stuck in the frame and required his shoulder to open. "Your uncle's keys," he said, handing them to Clara. "There are 3, front door, back door, and the lockbox under the counter." Clara stepped inside and immediately wanted to cry. Dust covered everything in a thick blanket. Shelves sagged under the weight of disorganized inventory, or stood empty, showing gaps like missing teeth. The floor was warped and creaked ominously. The ceiling had water stains from a leak that had apparently gone unfixed. The air smelled of mildew and mouse droppings and failure. "Your uncle's living quarters are upstairs," Blackwood said quietly. 2 rooms, bedroom and sitting room. There's a stove for heat and cooking, but the chimney needs cleaning. The privy is out back. Clara walked slowly down the center aisle, her boots leaving prints in the dust. She touched a shelf and her fingers came away gray. A mouse skittered across her path and disappeared into a hole in the baseboard. This was her inheritance. This ruin. The inventory list is in the ledger, Blackwood continued, gesturing to the counter where a leather-bound book sat. Though I should warn you, the actual inventory may not match the list. Your uncle's record-keeping became erratic toward the end. Clara reached the back of the store, where a door led to the storage room. She opened it and found more chaos. Crates stacked haphazardly, some broken open, merchandise strewn about as if a storm had blown through. Miss Bennett, Blackwood said gently, it's not too late to reconsider. The buyer I mentioned is still interested. You could walk away from this right now with enough money to start fresh somewhere else. Clara turned to face him. How much is the buyer offering? $300. It was less than she'd hoped, but more than she had. $300 could get her back to Philadelphia and keep her fed for months while she looked for work. It was the sensible choice, the smart choice, the coward's choice. She thought of her uncle's letter. Don't wait until you're dying to start living. She thought of Caleb Rowan stepping in front of bullets for a woman he didn't know, asking for nothing, disappearing into the shadows. She thought of Philadelphia, of Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, of the endless gray years stretching ahead with nothing but survival and slow suffocation. No, Clara said. Miss Bennett, no. She lifted her chin, meeting Blackwood's eyes. This store is mine. I'm going to make it work. Blackwood sighed. Then you're either very brave or very foolish. Time will tell which. He pulled out his pocket watch. I have another appointment. The ledger is there, along with the inventory lists and the accounts receivable. People who owe the store money. Fair warning. Most of those debts are uncollectible. Your uncle extended credit to folks who had no intention of paying. I understand. Do you? Blackwood studied her. Running a store on the frontier isn't like running a shop back east. You'll be dealing with cowboys, miners, drifters, men who aren't used to taking orders from women. You'll be negotiating with suppliers who will try to cheat you because you're young and female and new. You'll be working alone, often late into the night in a town where violence is common and law is flexible. I understand, Clara repeated. Blackwood shook his head but didn't argue further. Then I wish you luck, Miss Bennett. You're going to need it. He tipped his hat and left, the door scraping shut behind him. Clara stood alone in the ruined store, surrounded by dust and mice and the accumulated failures of her uncle's good intentions. The task ahead was enormous: cleaning, organizing, making repairs, learning the business, winning customers, managing accounts. Impossible, probably, but it was hers. She set her bag on the counter, rolled up her sleeves, and got to work. By noon, Clara had swept the main floor, revealing boards that were scarred but solid. She'd organized one shelf completely: dry goods, tins of beans and tomatoes and peaches, bags of flour and sugar. It wasn't much, but it was progress. She was dragging a broken crate to the back door when someone knocked on the front. Clara looked up, dusty and disheveled, to see a woman standing in the doorway. She was perhaps 40, with blonde hair going gray and a kind face marked by the same weathering that affected everyone in Red Hollow. Miss Bennett? The woman asked. I'm Sarah Pritchard. I run the boarding house down the street. Heard you'd arrived. Yes, Clara looked down at herself, at the dust covering her dress, at her hair escaping its pins. I apologize for my appearance. I'm just getting started on the cleaning. Don't apologize for honest work. Sarah stepped inside, looking around with a practiced eye. George would be glad to see someone in here again. Store's been sitting empty since he died. Did you know my uncle well? Well enough. He was a good man, soft-hearted, maybe too much so, but good. Sarah's gaze settled on Clara with frank assessment. Heard about yesterday. Heard Caleb Rowan saved your life. Clara's hands tightened on the crate. News travels fast. It's a small town. Not much happens, so when something does, everyone knows about it by sunset. Sarah smiled slightly. Also heard you've been asking about him? I wanted to thank him. That's what I came to talk to you about. Sarah's smile faded. Miss Bennett, Clara, if I may, I'm going to tell you something that might sound harsh, but it comes from a place of kindness. Caleb Rowan isn't a man you want to involve yourself with. Clara felt herself bristle. He saved my life. And I'm sure he had his reasons, but those reasons weren't about starting anything with you. Caleb's been through things. Sarah paused, choosing her words carefully. He lost his wife and baby daughter 7 years ago, cholera outbreak. He was away on a cattle drive when it happened, came home to find them both dead and buried. Clara's breath caught. That's horrible. It broke something in him. He sold off most of his cattle, kept just enough to survive, and withdrew from the world. Hardly comes to town except to pick up mail he carries for folks out on the ranches. Does it to make a little money, not because he wants to. Doesn't talk to anyone if he can help it. Doesn't attend socials or church or anything. Just lives out there alone, barely existing. That doesn't mean... It means, Sarah interrupted gently, that he's not looking for thanks or friendship or anything else. It means he saved you because that's the kind of man he is underneath all that grief and isolation. But it doesn't mean he wants you showing up at his ranch trying to repay him. Best thing you can do for Caleb Rowan is leave him be. Clara set down the crate and faced Sarah fully. Everyone keeps telling me that. Leave him be. Let it go. Don't get involved. But he took a bullet for me, Mrs. Pritchard. A bullet that could have killed him. How am I supposed to just ignore that? By respecting what he clearly wants, which is to be left alone. Sarah's voice was kind but firm. I know you're from back east, where maybe things work different, but out here, we respect a man's choice to keep to himself, especially a man who's suffered what Caleb has. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to insist that gratitude wasn't the same as intrusion, that a simple thank you couldn't hurt. But something in Sarah's eyes stopped her. A warning, or maybe a plea. I understand, Clara said finally, though she wasn't sure she did. Sarah's expression softened. Good. Now, I came to invite you to dinner tonight at my boarding house. Nothing fancy, just a good meal and a chance to meet some of the women in town. You shouldn't be alone your first week here. The kindness in the offer made Clara's throat tight. Thank you. I'd like that. 6 o'clock. Don't bother dressing up. We're not formal out here. Sarah glanced around the store again. And if you need help with the cleaning or organizing, let me know. I've got boarders who owe me favors. After Sarah left, Clara stood in the dusty silence, thinking about Caleb Rowan, thinking about a man so broken by grief that he'd spent 7 years hiding from the world, thinking about blue eyes that held shadows deeper than any she'd seen. She understood loss. Her parents had died when she was 9, fever, sudden and merciless. She understood loneliness. She'd spent the last 5 years essentially alone, keeping everyone at arm's length because letting people close only led to disappointment. But she'd never experienced the kind of devastation Caleb had. Couldn't imagine coming home to find everyone you loved dead and buried. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe the kindest thing Clara could do was respect his isolation. But that didn't stop her from thinking about him as she worked through the afternoon. Didn't stop her from wondering if he was all right, if his wound was healing, if anyone was taking care of him out there in his self-imposed exile. It didn't stop her from wanting, just once more, to see those blue eyes and understand what they'd been trying to tell her. Clara spent the afternoon making the store habitable. She swept until her arms ached, organized until her back screamed in protest, hauled broken crates and spoiled goods to the burn pile behind the building. By the time she needed to get ready for dinner, she'd cleared 2 aisles and 3 shelves, found a family of mice that she evicted with a broom, and discovered that the roof leak was worse than it appeared. She washed as best she could with cold water from the pump out back, changed into her least dusty dress, and walked to Sarah Pritchard's boarding house just as the sun was setting. The boarding house was a 2-story structure in better repair than most of Red Hollow's buildings. Warm light glowed from the windows, and Clara could smell something delicious, roasted meat, fresh bread, before she even reached the door. Sarah welcomed her with a smile. Right on time. Come in, come in. The dining room held a long table surrounded by women of various ages, all turning to look at Clara with frank curiosity. Sarah made introductions. Mrs. Thornton, the blacksmith's wife, her daughter Emma, who was perhaps 17, Mrs. Chen, who ran the laundry, Miss Alice Murphy, the schoolteacher, and 3 younger women who worked at various establishments in town. Sit, sit, Sarah urged, pulling out a chair for Clara. "We're just about to serve." The meal was simple but hearty: roasted chicken, potatoes, green beans, and fresh bread that Clara suspected Sarah had baked that day. As they ate, the women peppered Clara with questions. Where was she from? How long did she plan to stay? Had she really been caught in the bank robbery? Clara answered as best she could, aware that she was being evaluated, judged, weighed against some frontier standard she didn't fully understand. "I heard Caleb Rowan saved you," Emma Thornton said, her young eyes bright with curiosity. "Is it true he got shot?" "Emma," her mother said sharply, "don't pry." "It's all right," Clara said. "Yes, it's true. He stepped in front of me when the robbers started shooting. I didn't even see him coming, just suddenly he was there, and then—" She stopped, remembering the impact of hitting his chest, the feeling of his arms around her, the way he'd covered her body with his own without hesitation. "That sounds like Caleb," Alice Murphy said quietly. The schoolteacher was perhaps 30, with intelligent eyes and a thoughtful manner. "Doesn't say much, but he acts when it matters." "Did you know him?" Clara asked. "Before he withdrew?" Alice exchanged a glance with Sarah. "I was just starting to teach here when his wife died. She was lovely, kind, funny, always helping folks. And their daughter, little Rebecca." Alice's voice wavered. "She was barely 2 years old, sweetest thing you ever saw." The table fell silent. Clara felt the weight of the tragedy, 7 years old, but still fresh in this small community's memory. "When Caleb came back from that cattle drive," Mrs. Thornton said softly, "and found them both gone, I've never seen a man break like that. Didn't speak for weeks, just stood in the cemetery day after day. We thought we'd lose him too." "But he survived," Clara said, "if you can call it that." Sarah's expression was sad. "He lives, but I'm not sure he's alive. Not really. Not the way he was before." Clara thought about that as the conversation moved to other topics: the coming winter, the new reverend who was too young and too earnest, the Miller boy who'd been caught stealing apples. She thought about survival versus living, about grief so profound it turned you into a ghost. She thought about a man who'd lost everything but still stepped in front of bullets for a stranger. After dinner, Sarah walked Clara back to the store. The night was cold and clear, stars scattered across the sky like salt spilled on a black table. "Thank you for the meal," Clara said when they reached the store. "And for the company. I didn't realize how much I needed it." "You're welcome anytime." Sarah hesitated, then added, "I meant what I said earlier about Caleb. I know it seems harsh, but—" "I understand," Clara interrupted gently. "I do. I won't bother him." Sarah looked relieved. "Good. The last thing that man needs is more pain, and that's all that comes from getting close to people when you're as broken as he is." After Sarah left, Clara climbed the stairs to her uncle's quarters. Her quarters now. 2 rooms, sparsely furnished, smelling of dust and death. She lit the lamp and looked around at what was now her home. A narrow bed, a small stove, a table with 2 chairs, shelves holding her uncle's few possessions. She sat at the table and pulled out her uncle's letter, reading it again by lamplight. "Don't wait until you're dying to start living." She'd made a choice today. She'd chosen to stay, to fight for this failing store, to build something instead of running. That was living, wasn't it? But as she climbed into bed and blew out the lamp, as Red Hollow's darkness pressed against the windows, Clara couldn't stop thinking about a man 2 hours north who was surviving but not living, who'd saved her life and asked for nothing, who carried grief like other men carried water. She couldn't stop thinking about blue eyes haunted by shadows. And she couldn't shake the feeling that their story wasn't finished, that the moment he'd pulled her from harm's way had been a beginning, not an ending, no matter what everyone told her. She fell asleep thinking about him and dreamed of letters written in a hand she'd never seen, saying things she couldn't quite read. When she woke the next morning, she found one waiting for her. The envelope had been slipped under her door sometime during the night, her name written across it in firm, masculine handwriting. No postage, no return address, just Miss Bennett. Clara's hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the message brief. "The leak in your roof is above the back corner. Patch it before the next rain, or you'll lose half your inventory. The mice are coming through the baseboard by the stove. Steel wool in the gaps will stop them. Your uncle kept his supplier contacts in the lockbox. Start there. No signature, no explanation, just help offered in silence from someone who knew she needed it. Clara held the letter, her heart pounding, and understood that everything Sarah had told her was wrong. Caleb Rowan wasn't finished with her. He'd just begun. Clara read the letter 3 more times before the sun had fully risen, tracing each word with her fingertip as if the paper itself held secrets. The handwriting was deliberate, controlled, the kind that came from a man who chose his words carefully because speaking had become too costly. She knew it was from Caleb. No one else in Red Hollow had reason to help her, and certainly no one else would do it anonymously, slipping advice under her door like a ghost leaving gifts. The practical nature of the guidance felt like him too. No flowery language, no unnecessary sentiment, just the information she needed to survive. Clara climbed the ladder to the roof that morning, dragging tar paper and nails she'd found in the storage room. The leak was exactly where the letter said it would be, a gap in the shingles wide enough to fit her hand through. She patched it clumsily, her fingers stiff from the cold October wind, aware that winter was coming and she had 1,000 other repairs to make before the first snow. When she came down, there were customers waiting. 2 cowboys needing tobacco, a woman wanting thread, a miner looking for lamp oil. Clara served them with hands still sticky from tar, learning prices from the faded tags her uncle had written, making change from the cash box and hoping she was doing it right. The woman, Mrs. Foster, she introduced herself, looked around the store with a critical eye. George always kept peppermint sticks by the counter, she said. My children loved them. I'll order some, Clara promised, making a note in the ledger. Mrs. Foster's expression softened slightly. You're trying, at least. That's more than I expected from an Eastern girl. After the customers left, Clara found the lockbox under the counter, right where the letter had said. Inside were contracts, supplier lists, correspondence from merchants in Helena and Butte, and as far away as San Francisco. She spent the afternoon reading through them, learning her uncle's business, understanding the web of credit and debt that had slowly strangled him. That night, another letter appeared under her door. Don't order the peppermint from Foster's usual supplier. He charges double what it's worth. Try Hendricks and Helena instead. The list is in the lockbox. Your credit is poor because of your uncle's debts, so you'll need to pay cash up front for the first few orders. The money in the cash box won't be enough. You'll need to sell something. Clara looked around her sparse quarters at her uncle's few possessions. What did she have worth selling? Her mother's cameo brooch was the only thing of value she owned, but she'd rather starve than part with it. Then she remembered the ledger, the accounts receivable, people who owed the store money. She spent the next morning going through the list, shocked by the amounts. Tom Brewster owed $43 for supplies taken on credit over 2 years. The Halverson family owed $67. The Morrison Ranch account showed $112 outstanding, dating back 3 years. Her uncle had been more than soft-hearted. He'd been reckless. Clara closed the ledger and made a decision. If she was going to make this store work, she needed to collect these debts. But the thought of confronting these people, strangers in a strange town, men who probably saw her as an easy mark, made her stomach clench. That afternoon, she walked to Tom Brewster's farm on the edge of town, the ledger page clutched in her hand. Brewster was working in his barn when she arrived, a lean man with suspicious eyes. Mr. Brewster, I'm Clara Bennett. I've taken over my uncle's store. Heard about you? He didn't stop working, didn't look at her directly. What do you want? According to the ledger, you owe the store $43 for supplies taken on credit. I need to collect payment. Now he looked at her. George never pressed for payment. George is dead, Clara said, keeping her voice steady. And I can't run the store on promises. I need the money, Mr. Brewster. Don't have it. Then we'll arrange a payment plan. $5 a month until I said I don't have it. Brewster's voice hardened. Crops failed last year. Lost half my chickens to disease. I'm barely keeping my family fed. You want blood from a stone? Go ahead and try, but you won't get money from me. Clara looked at his worn boots, his patched shirt, the general air of struggling poverty that hung over the farm. She thought of her uncle extending credit because he saw need and couldn't turn away. Keep the debt, she said quietly, but no more credit. If you need supplies from the store, you pay cash. Brewster's eyebrows rose. That's it? That's it. She got similar responses at 3 other stops. The Halversons had 6 children and a sick horse. The Morrison Ranch was struggling through drought. The money was gone, spent or lost, or never really there to begin with. By the time Clara returned to the store at sunset, she'd collected nothing and forgiven nearly $200 in debt. Foolish, probably. Exactly what had ruined her uncle. But she couldn't squeeze blood from stones, and she wouldn't become the kind of person who did. That night's letter arrived before she'd even climbed the stairs to bed. You did the right thing today. The debts were uncollectible anyway. Better to forgive them and earn goodwill than fight for money that doesn't exist. But you still need cash for supplies. There's a buyer in Helena who'll pay fair price for your uncle's pocket watch. It's in the lockbox, wrapped in cloth. Sterling silver, worth about $60. He wouldn't mind you selling it. He'd want you to survive. Clara found the watch exactly where the letter described. Beautiful, heavy, with her uncle's initials engraved on the case. She held it in her palm, feeling the weight of it, the history. Her uncle had carried this every day, had checked it countless times, marking the hours of a life that had ended too soon. She wrapped it carefully and set it aside for the journey to Helena. Then she sat at her uncle's desk and wrote a letter of her own, leaving it on the counter downstairs where the mysterious writer would find it. Thank you for the advice. But I have questions. Why are you helping me? What do you want in return? And why won't you show yourself? Clara Bennett. She didn't expect an answer. But the next morning there was another envelope under her door. I don't want anything in return. As for why I'm helping, you needed help, and I was in a position to give it. That's reason enough. I won't show myself because what I have to offer is better given from a distance. Accept the help or don't, but don't ask me to be something I'm not. The words stung more than they should have. Clara read them over her morning coffee, feeling simultaneously grateful and frustrated. She wanted to know him, this ghost who watched over her, who knew the store's problems better than she did, who offered help with one hand while pushing her away with the other. But she was also beginning to understand. He'd lost everyone he loved. Getting close to people again, letting them close to him, must feel like inviting catastrophe. So he helped from the shadows, giving what he could without risking his heart. It should have been enough. The practical part of Clara knew that, but the part that remembered being held against his chest, that remembered blue eyes seeing her in a way no one else had, that part wanted more than anonymous letters. That part wanted to see him again. Over the next week, the letters became a routine. Every morning, Clara found advice waiting under her door. Which suppliers to trust and which to avoid. How to arrange the store for better traffic flow. What inventory sold well in winter and what would sit on the shelves gathering dust. The letters were never long, never personal, but they were lifelines, guidance from someone who understood the business and the town in ways she couldn't yet. And slowly, painfully, Clara began to make progress. She sold her uncle's watch in Helena and used the money to order fresh inventory. She cleaned and organized until the store looked almost respectable. She learned her customers' names and preferences, learned to read the weather in their faces, learned which debts to pursue and which to forgive. The women of Red Hollow slowly accepted her. Sarah Pritchard brought her fresh bread twice a week. Emma Thornton helped her unpack shipments. Mrs. Chen taught her which cowboys could be trusted and which needed watching. Alice Murphy spent evenings helping Clara improve the store's bookkeeping, her teacher's precision turning chaos into order. You're doing well, Alice said one night, reviewing Clara's ledgers. Better than I expected, honestly. George loved this store, but he didn't have the spine for business. You do. I have help, Clara admitted. She'd told no one about the letters, guarding them like precious secrets. Someone's been advising me. Alice's expression grew knowing. Caleb? Clara's head snapped up. How did you... Who else would it be? He's the only one who knew George's business well enough. Used to help him with orders and inventory when Mary was alive. George relied on him. Alice closed the ledger. He's still helping, just from a distance now. That's very like him. Have you seen him since that first day? No, but his ranch is on my route when I visit the homesteaders' children for lessons. I see his horse sometimes, see smoke from his chimney. He's alive, if that's what you're asking. Alice studied Clara carefully. Why? Are you planning to ride out there? Everyone keeps warning me not to. Everyone's right. Caleb doesn't want visitors, doesn't want connection. He's made that very clear over the years. Alice's voice softened. But I can see it in your face, Clara. You're thinking about him. You want to thank him, maybe more than that. And I'm telling you, as someone who cares about both of you, don't. He'll only break your heart. What if I don't care about that? Then you're a fool. But Alice's tone was gentle, almost sad. Look, I understand the appeal. Caleb's a good man under all that grief and isolation. He was a wonderful husband, a devoted father. When Mary was alive, he smiled. I remember being shocked the first time I saw it, because it transformed his whole face. But that man is gone, Clara. He died with Mary and Rebecca. What's left is just a shell going through motions. Clara thought about the letters, about the care in each word, the attention to detail that spoke of someone still engaged with the world despite his isolation. I'm not sure that's true. Don't mistake practical help for emotional availability, Alice warned. Caleb can tell you how to run a store without letting you into his heart. In fact, that's probably easier for him. Helping from a distance, never risking real connection. But Clara had already decided. Not to push, not to demand, but to respond in kind. If Caleb could help her from the shadows, she could reach back the same way. That night, she wrote another letter and left it on the counter. Your advice about the Hendricks account was right. He gave me fair prices and quick delivery. The store is beginning to turn a small profit. I may actually survive this. You asked me not to ask for more than you can give. I won't. But I want you to know that your help has meant everything. Without it, I would have failed. You saved me twice. Once from bullets, once from ignorance. I don't know how to repay that. I hope your wound healed well. I hope you're taking care of yourself, though I suspect you're not. With gratitude, Clara. She almost signed it differently, almost wrote something more personal, more revealing. But instinct held her back. Push too hard, and he might disappear entirely. Better to match his careful distance, to build trust slowly. The next morning brought a longer letter than usual. The wound is fine. Barely a scar. Don't waste concern on me. You're doing better than surviving. You're building something. I watched George try for 20 years and fail because he couldn't say no to people. You have his kindness, but also steel he lacked. The store will succeed because you won't let it fail. Winter is coming. Order extra lamp oil, matches, and coffee. When the snow hits, people stock up fast and supplies run short. Also, your chimney needs sweeping before you light the stove in earnest. Ask Tom Brewster. He does it for cheap, and you forgave his debt. He'll do right by you. The roof patch you did won't hold through heavy snow. I'll fix it properly. Clara read the last line 3 times, her heart racing. I'll fix it properly. That meant he'd come here, to the store, to her. That meant she might see him again. She spent the next 3 days in a state of anxious anticipation, watching the street from the store window, her pulse jumping every time a horse approached. But Caleb didn't come during business hours. He came at night. Clara woke to the sound of footsteps on the roof, boot heels careful but audible in the pre-dawn silence. She rose quickly, pulling a shawl over her nightgown, and crept to the window. A figure moved in the darkness above, silhouetted against the stars. Large, broad-shouldered, working with quiet efficiency. She should go back to bed. Should respect his obvious desire for invisibility. But Clara found herself pulling on her boots and going downstairs, drawn by a need she couldn't name. The store was dark except for moonlight through the window. Clara stood in the shadows, looking up at the ceiling, hearing the sounds of repair work overhead. Shingles being removed. Hammering, carefully muffled. The scrape of boots on wood. After an hour, the sound stopped. Clara heard him climb down. There must be a ladder at the back of the building, and she made a split-second decision. She moved to the back door and opened it just as his boots hit the ground. Caleb froze, one hand still on the ladder, his face half hidden by the brim of his hat. In the moonlight, Claire could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he'd gone utterly still, like a wild animal deciding whether to flee. "Thank you," Claire said softly. "For the roof. For everything." He didn't move, didn't speak. The silence stretched between them, fragile as glass. "I'm not trying to trap you," Clara continued, I know you don't want whatever it is you think I want. I just needed to say thank you. To your face. Once. Still, he said nothing. But he didn't leave either. He stood there in the moonlight, and Clara could feel him deciding, weighing, calculating risk against something else she couldn't name. Finally, he spoke. The roof will hold now, through the winter. His voice was rough from disuse, deeper than she remembered. It sent shivers down her spine. I don't know how to repay you, Clara said, for any of it. The roof, the letters, the advice. You're the reason I'm still here. Don't need repaying. He stepped away from the ladder, and Clara saw him properly for the first time since that chaotic day in the street. He wore dark clothes that blended with the night, his hat pulled low, his movements controlled and careful. Just do what you're doing. Make the store work. That's enough. Is it? The question escaped before Clara could stop it. Is advice from the shadows really all you want to give? She saw him flinch, saw the way his jaw tightened. It's all I have to give. I don't believe that. Then you don't know me. His voice hardened. I'm not what you think, Miss Bennet. I'm not some romantic figure waiting to be saved by a pretty woman from the East. I'm just a man trying to get through each day without falling apart. Helping you, it gives me something to focus on besides my own failures. Don't make it into more than it is. The words should have hurt, should have sent her running back inside, embarrassed and rejected. But Clara heard something underneath them, something desperate and frightened that had nothing to do with cruelty and everything to do with self-protection. I'm not trying to save you, she said quietly. I'm just trying to know you. You can't. He turned away, toward where his horse must be waiting in the darkness. The letters will continue. The advice will continue. But this, us talking, you asking questions, getting ideas about who I am or what I need, this stops now. And if I have questions about the store, about the town, write them down, leave them on the counter. I'll answer. He paused, his back still to her. But don't wait up for me again. Don't come looking for answers in the dark. This is all there is, Miss Bennet. Learn to live with it. He walked into the shadows and disappeared. A moment later, Clara heard hoofbeats fading into the night. She stood in the cold for a long time after he left, her shawl pulled tight, her breath misting in the freezing air. She should feel rejected, should accept his boundaries and stop pushing. But all Clara felt was certainty that Alice was wrong. Caleb wasn't an empty shell going through motions. He was a man in terrible pain, yes, but he was still alive underneath it, still capable of caring, of helping, of connecting, even if he only allowed himself to do it from a distance. And Clara understood distance, had lived with it herself for years, keeping everyone at arm's length, protecting herself from disappointment and loss. She recognized the walls Caleb had built because she'd built similar ones. The difference was, Clara was ready to tear hers down. Whether Caleb was ready or not remained to be seen. The next morning, Clara found a letter under her door, longer than any before. I was too harsh last night. You didn't deserve that. But you need to understand something. 7 years ago, I lost everything that mattered. My wife, my daughter, my future, all gone in the space of a week while I was away driving cattle to market. I came home to graves and silence, and I haven't been right since. People in town look at me with pity or fear, or both. They think I'm broken beyond repair, and maybe they're right. But what they don't see is that the brokenness is all I have left of Mary and Rebecca. If I heal, if I move on, if I let myself care about someone new, it feels like betraying them, like saying their deaths don't matter anymore. So I live out at the ranch where their ghosts are, and I help people from a distance where it's safe. And I don't let anyone close because close means loss, and I can't survive losing anyone else. You seem like a good person, Clara. You deserve better than a broken man who can only offer letters in the dark. So please, accept the help I can give, but don't ask for more. Don't make this harder than it already is. Caleb. It was the first time he'd signed his full name, the first time he'd revealed anything personal, anything real. Clara read the letter until she had it memorized, until she could close her eyes and see each word. She understood loss and grief, understood the fear of letting people in, but she also understood something Caleb seemed to have forgotten, that healing didn't mean forgetting, that moving forward didn't mean leaving the dead behind. She wrote back carefully, choosing each word with the same deliberation he used. Caleb, I lost my parents when I was 9. Fever took them both in 3 days. I remember my mother's last words to me. Be brave, Clara. Be strong. And I have been. For 14 years, I've been strong and brave and completely alone, because being strong meant never needing anyone. But strength without connection isn't strength, it's just survival. And survival isn't the same as living. I'm not asking you to forget Mary and Rebecca. I'm not asking you to stop grieving or to pretend the past doesn't matter. But I am saying that helping me, really helping me, not just leaving anonymous letters, wouldn't betray them. It would honor them because I think they'd want you to live, not just survive. You saved my life. You're saving my business. Maybe it's time to let someone try to save you back. I'll be in the store every day if you decide to risk it. Clara. She left the letter on the counter and went about her work, trying not to watch the door, trying not to hope. The day passed slowly. Customers came and went. Clara sold dry goods and coffee, extended credit to Mrs. Chen's daughter who'd just married, listened to gossip about the new schoolteacher courting Emma Thornton. Night fell, and no response came. Clara climbed the stairs to her quarters, disappointment settling heavy in her chest. She'd pushed too hard, said too much, driven him away entirely. But the next morning brought not a letter but a sound that made her heart leap, hammering from downstairs. Clara dressed quickly and rushed down to find Caleb working on the front door, replacing the warped frame with new wood. He didn't look up when she appeared, just kept working with focused intensity, his movements precise and economical. Clara stood at the bottom of the stairs, afraid to speak, afraid to break whatever spell had brought him here in daylight. Finally, Caleb set down his hammer and straightened. He still didn't look at her directly, but his voice was steady when he spoke. The door was swelling. Come winter, you wouldn't be able to open it. Thank you, Clara said softly. I'll be here most of the day. Working. If you need to open the store, I can work around customers. It wasn't much. Wasn't a declaration or a promise or anything close to what Clara had hoped for. But it was something. It was him, here, in the light, choosing to be visible even though it clearly terrified him. I'll put coffee on, Clara said. She saw the ghost of a smile cross his face, there and gone in an instant. That'd be good. Clara made coffee and brought him a cup, their fingers brushing briefly when he took it. The contact lasted maybe a second, but Clara felt it like electricity, like possibility. Caleb drank the coffee in silence, then returned to work. Clara opened the store for business, serving customers while he repaired the door. People stared. Caleb Rowan, in town, working at the Bennett store, visible and real. The gossip would spread like wildfire. But Caleb ignored the stares, ignored the whispers, and kept working. By noon, the door was fixed, hung perfectly, opening and closing smoothly. I'll come back tomorrow, he said, gathering his tools. The shutters need replacing before winter. You don't have to... I know. He finally looked at her directly, those blue eyes meeting hers. I'm choosing to. After he left, Clara stood in the store, her heart racing, understanding that something fundamental had shifted. Caleb was still afraid, still broken, still grieving, but he was also choosing to try, choosing to risk, choosing her. The letters continued, but now they were supplemented by his presence. Caleb came to the store every few days, always early morning before many customers arrived, always focused on some repair or improvement. He fixed the shutters as promised, repaired shelves, reinforced the floor where it sagged, built a better counter with drawers that actually closed. They didn't talk much at first. Clara would bring him coffee, and they'd work in comfortable silence, her serving customers, him doing whatever needed doing. But slowly, carefully, conversation began. Your uncle was a good man, Caleb said one morning, sanding a new shelf. Terrible businessman, but good man. That seems to be the consensus, Clara replied, unpacking a shipment of fabric. He helped me after Mary died. Brought food to the ranch, didn't ask for conversation, just left it and went away. Did that for 6 months. Caleb's hand stilled on the sandpaper. Never asked for thanks or repayment. Just saw a need and met it. Like you're doing for me. Maybe, or maybe I'm just trying to repay an old debt. But his eyes, when they met hers, suggested it was more complicated than that. As November arrived, bringing cold that cut like knives, their careful dance continued. Caleb taught Clara about the rhythms of frontier life, how to read weather in the sky, which cowboys to trust with credit, how to negotiate with suppliers who saw a young woman and thought easy mark. Clara listened and learned, absorbing not just the practical knowledge but the sound of his voice, the way his face softened when he forgot to guard himself, the rare moments when something almost like peace crossed his features. "You're getting better at this," he said one afternoon, reviewing her ledgers. "Profit margins improving. Thanks to you." "No," he shook his head. "You're the one running the business. I just pointed you in the right direction." "You did more than that." Clara set down the inventory list she'd been checking. "Caleb, without your help, I would have failed in a week. You saved me." He shifted uncomfortably, as he always did when she acknowledged what he'd done. "Anyone would have helped, but no one else did. Just you." She moved closer, watching his shoulders tense, his hands grip the edge of the counter. "Why?" "Told you. I owed your uncle." "That's not the whole truth." Caleb was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working, that internal war visible on his face. Finally he spoke, his voice low and rough. "When I saw you in the street that day, frozen, about to be shot, I don't know. Something just moved in me. First time I'd felt anything besides grief in 7 years. And then after, when I heard you were trying to run the store alone with no help, no knowledge, no support, I couldn't just walk away. Couldn't let you fail when I knew how to help. So you started writing letters. Seemed safer than showing up in person. Letting you see me, know me, that felt dangerous. Still does." He finally looked at her, really looked, and Clara saw the fear in his eyes alongside something else, something that looked like longing. "But the letters weren't enough, were they?" "No," Clara admitted. "I wanted to know you, the real you, not just words on paper. This is the real me. Broken, bitter, barely functional. Still think you want to know that?" Clara reached out slowly, carefully, and laid her hand over his on the counter. She felt him tense, felt him resist the urge to pull away. "Yes, I think I do." They stood like that, hands touching, something fragile and precious building between them. Then a customer entered, breaking the moment, and Caleb stepped back to safety, back to distance. But that night's letter was different. "Clara, I don't know what I'm doing. Don't know if this is healing or just another kind of wound. But when I'm with you, working on the store, drinking your terrible coffee, listening to you bargain with suppliers, I feel something besides pain, something I'd forgotten existed. I'm afraid of it. Afraid of you. Afraid of what happens if I let myself care and then lose you too, but I'm also afraid of what happens if I don't try." See, Clara held the letter against her chest and knew they were standing on the edge of something that would change everything. Knew Caleb was offering her his heart, cracked and damaged and still bleeding from old wounds, but his nonetheless. The question was whether she had the courage to take it. Clara woke the next morning with Caleb's letter still clutched in her hand. The paper creased from where she'd held it through restless sleep. The words had carved themselves into her mind, and she understood what they meant, what they cost him to write. Fear and hope warring in equal measure, a man standing at the edge of a cliff trying to decide whether to jump. She knew that feeling, had lived with it herself since the moment his arms had caught her in the street, since the first letter had appeared under her door. Every day with Caleb felt like walking a tightrope, one wrong word capable of sending him retreating back into his isolation. But Clara was tired of being careful, tired of the dance they were doing, circling each other like wary animals, both wanting connection but terrified to reach for it. So when Caleb arrived that morning to work on the storage room shelves, Clara made a decision. She brought him coffee as usual, but this time she didn't retreat to the front of the store. She stayed, leaning against the doorframe, watching him work. "I got your letter," she said quietly. Caleb's hands stilled on the board he was measuring. He didn't look at her. "Figured you would. You said you're afraid of what happens if you let yourself care." Clara's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm afraid too. I've been alone so long, Caleb. 5 years in Philadelphia, keeping everyone at a distance because it was safer, easier.
And then I came here thinking I'd just run a store, keep my head down, survive. But then you saved my life, and you kept saving it with those letters. And now I'm standing here terrified because I don't know how to do this." He turned to face her then, sawdust in his dark hair, those blue eyes searching her face. "Do what?" "Let someone in." The words came out barely above a whisper. "You're not the only one who's broken, you know."
Maybe we're both just broken people trying to figure out how to be whole again. Caleb set down his tools and took a step toward her, then stopped, as if hitting an invisible wall. "Clara, I don't know if I can be what you need. Hell, I don't know if I can be anything besides what I am. A man who talks to ghosts and lives in the past and can barely manage to show up here without my hands shaking." "Your hands aren't shaking now." He looked down at them, surprised, as if he hadn't noticed. "No, I guess they're not." "You know what I think?" Clara pushed off from the doorframe, closing the distance between them by half. "I think you're stronger than you believe. You survived the worst thing that can happen to a person, and you're still here, still helping people, still capable of kindness, even when it costs you. That's not broken, Caleb. That's the opposite of broken." "You don't understand." His voice went rough with emotion. "When Mary died, when Rebecca died, I wanted to die too. For months I thought about it. Riding out into the mountains, never coming back, ending it so I wouldn't have to feel the pain anymore. The only thing that stopped me was knowing Mary would have hated that, would have called me a coward." Clara's throat tightened, but she didn't look away. "I'm glad you didn't." "Are you?" "Because most days I'm still not sure I made the right choice." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated, searching for words. "That's what you'd be signing up for, Clara. A man who isn't sure he wants to be alive, who carries his dead family everywhere he goes, who'll probably never be whole again." "I'm not asking you to be whole," Clara said, and now she did close the distance completely, standing close enough to see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, close enough to smell leather and sawdust and him. "I'm just asking you to try. With me. One day at a time." Caleb stared at her, and Clara watched the war play out on his face. Fear against longing, grief against hope, the desire to retreat against the equally powerful desire to stay. She held her breath, waiting, giving him space to choose. Finally, slowly, Caleb lifted his hand and touched her face, just his fingertips against her cheek, feather light, as if he was afraid she might shatter. "I'm going to disappoint you." "Probably," Clara agreed, leaning into his touch. "I'll probably disappoint you too. That's what people do. But we can try anyway." "I don't remember how." "Then we'll figure it out together." For a moment, Clara thought he might kiss her, saw the desire flicker in his eyes, saw him lean closer. But then a customer's voice called from the front of the store, and the spell broke. Caleb stepped back, his hand falling away, his expression shuddering. "You should go," he said. "Handle your customer." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to pull him back, but she'd learned something about Caleb in the weeks since they'd met. Push too hard and he'd bolt. So she nodded and went to the front, serving Mrs. Thornton and her daughter Emma, who'd come for thread and candles. "Was that Caleb Rowan's voice I heard?" Mrs. Thornton asked, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Is he here?" "He's fixing some shelves in the back," Claire said, keeping her tone neutral. Emma craned her neck, trying to see into the storage room. "I've never actually seen him up close. Mama says he used to be handsome before his wife died." "Emma!" Mrs. Thornton said sharply. "That's rude." "But it's true, isn't it? Everyone says he used to smile and laugh, and now he's just—" "He's still a person deserving of respect," Clara interrupted, her voice harder than she intended. "And yes, he's helping me with repairs, that's all." But Mrs. Thornton's knowing look suggested she didn't believe that was all. After they left, Clara stood alone in the store, listening to the sounds of Caleb working in the back, wondering if she'd ruined everything by pushing too hard, asking too much. She didn't have to wonder long. When she returned to the storage room, Caleb was packing up his tools. "You're leaving?" Clara's heart sank. "I need to check on the ranch. Haven't been there in 3 days." He wouldn't meet her eyes. "I'll come back tomorrow. Finish the shelves." "Caleb, don't." He finally looked at her, and his expression was bleak. "Don't make this more than it is, Clara. I'm helping with the store because I said I would. That's all." The words hit like a slap, but Clara forced herself to stay calm. That's not all, and you know it. Then maybe it should be. He hefted his tool bag. Maybe I was wrong to let it become more. Maybe the letters should have been enough. He left before Clara could respond, the back door slamming behind him with a finality that made her chest ache. She stood in the storage room surrounded by half-finished shelves, understanding that this was what loving Caleb Rowan meant. 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, progress measured in inches while he fought his own fear every step of the way. But Clara had fought her own fears to get here, had traveled 1,500 miles and chosen to stay in a dying town with a dying store because something in her refused to give up. She could be patient, could give him space to run when he needed to, knowing he'd come back. At least, she hoped he would. That night, no letter came. Or the next night. Or the night after that. By the 4th morning, Clara was beginning to panic. Had she pushed him away for good? Had her confession about being broken too, about wanting to try together, been the thing that finally sent him running back to his ranch and his ghosts? She threw herself into work, trying not to think about it. The store was doing better now, really better. She'd collected enough money to pay off the last of her uncle's debts and order new inventory. Customers were returning, drawn by fair prices and the stock she'd carefully cultivated based on Caleb's advice. Women stopped to chat when they shopped, sharing recipes and gossip. Men tipped their hats when they passed. Red Hollow was slowly becoming less hostile, more like home. But none of it felt like victory without Caleb there to see it. On the 5th morning, Clara woke before dawn to the sound of something scraping against her door. She rushed to open it and found not a letter, but a wrapped package, heavy and rectangular. Inside was a book. Old, leather-bound, the pages yellowed with age. The title read Practical Business Management for Western Merchants. A note was tucked inside the front cover. This was Mary's. She helped me run the ranch accounts before Rebecca was born. She was better with numbers than I ever was. Better with everything, really. I've been carrying this around for 7 years. Couldn't make myself look at it because it reminded me too much of her sitting at our kitchen table, writing in those careful numbers, laughing when I got the math wrong. But I looked at it last night, read through some of her notes in the margins, and I realized something. Mary wouldn't want this book sitting in a trunk gathering dust. She'd want it being used, helping someone, helping you. I ran because that's what I do. Get close to something good and immediately sabotage it because good things don't last, and if they don't last, then losing them destroys you. But running from you felt worse than staying, so I'm trying, badly. But I'm trying. The shelves still need finishing. I'll be there this afternoon if you'll have me. See. Clara pressed the book to her chest, tears streaming down her face. This wasn't just a gift. It was trust, vulnerability. Caleb opening a door he'd kept locked for 7 years and inviting her through. His dead wife's book filled with her handwriting, her thoughts, her presence. He was sharing that with Clara, acknowledging that moving forward didn't mean forgetting. She spent the morning reading through the book, studying Mary's notes, feeling oddly connected to this woman she'd never met. Mary's handwriting was neat and precise, her observations about business, practical, and insightful. In the margins, she'd written little jokes, sketched tiny pictures, left pieces of herself scattered through the pages. Clara understood what this book meant to Caleb, what it cost him to give it to her. And she understood what he was really saying, not just that he was trying, but that he trusted her with the most precious parts of his past. When Caleb arrived that afternoon, Clara was waiting. She'd made fresh coffee, cleared the storage room so he could work uninterrupted, and she'd written her own note, which she handed to him silently. He read it standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Caleb, thank you for the book, for trusting me with something so precious. I'll take care of it. I understand running. I've done it myself more times than I can count, but I'm not going anywhere. When you need to run, I'll be here when you come back. When you need space, I'll give it to you. When you need someone to just sit with you in silence, I'll do that too. I'm not trying to replace Mary. I could never do that, and I wouldn't want to. But maybe there's room in your life for both, for the love you lost and the possibility of something new. I'm here. Whenever you're ready. Clara Caleb folded the note carefully and tucked it into his shirt pocket, over his heart. Then, without a word, he set down his tools, crossed the distance between them, and pulled Clara into his arms. It wasn't a kiss, just an embrace, his arms wrapped around her, his face buried in her hair, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a tilting world. Clara held him back just as tightly, feeling him shake slightly, feeling 7 years of loneliness and grief and fear bleeding out of him in this single moment of connection. "I'm terrified," he whispered against her hair.
I know. If I lose you, you won't. You can't promise that. No, Clara admitted, but I can promise I'm not going anywhere by choice. I can promise I'll fight for this, for us, as hard as I fought to make this store work. Caleb pulled back just enough to look at her face, his hands cupping her cheeks. Why? Why fight for a broken man who can barely stand being in town, who'll probably never dance at a social or smile easily or be anything like normal? Because you're worth fighting for. Clara covered his hands with hers. And because I'm tired of being safe. I want to live, Caleb, really live. And somehow, impossibly, you make me feel alive. This time he did kiss her. Soft and tentative and sweet, like he was afraid she might disappear if he pressed too hard. Clara kissed him back, pouring everything she couldn't say into it. All the hope and fear and desperate longing that had been building since the moment he'd thrown himself between her and those bullets. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. We'll figure it out. I'll mess it up. Probably. I'll mess it up too. Clara smiled against his lips. But we can mess it up together. He huffed a sound that might have been a laugh, rusty from disuse but real. Together? That's a terrifying word. The best things usually are. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other, the storage room full of half-finished shelves and tools and possibility. Then Clara heard the front door open, a customer arriving, and she reluctantly stepped back. I should go, Caleb said. I'll finish the shelves. Stay as long as you need me. The words were simple, practical, but Clara heard the promise underneath. He wasn't running, not today. She kissed him once more, quickly, then went to handle her customer, her heart so full she thought it might burst. Over the next 2 weeks, something shifted between them. Caleb still arrived early, still worked on repairs and improvements, but now Clara worked beside him when she could, their shoulders brushing, their hands touching in passing, small intimacies that spoke of growing comfort. He talked more now. Not about Mary and Rebecca, that wound was still too raw, but about the ranch, about his childhood in Kentucky, about the cattle drives he used to make before grief had anchored him to the land. Clara shared her own stories, growing up in Philadelphia after her parents died, working as a seamstress, the endless gray years of just surviving. You're good with your hands, Caleb observed one afternoon, watching her repair a torn feed sack with neat, precise stitches. Better than most I've seen. I was a seamstress for 5 years, made dresses for women who looked through me like I was invisible. Clara tied off the thread. I was good at it, but I hated every minute. Hated being invisible, hated making beautiful things for other people while I wore the same 3 dresses until they were threadbare. You're not invisible now. Clara looked up to find him watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. No? No. You're the most visible person in Red Hollow. Everyone talks about you. The Eastern girl who took over Bennett's store and made it work, who forgave debts and treated people fair, who didn't run when things got hard. They talk about you too, Clara said softly. About how Caleb Rowan finally came down from his mountain. About how you're helping me. Let them talk. But his jaw tightened, and Clara knew the attention bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Does it make you want to run? All the staring and gossip? Caleb was quiet for a moment, considering. Used to, it would have, but now... He looked at her, really looked, and Clara saw something like wonder in his eyes. Now I think staying with you is worth the discomfort. That night, Clara found another letter under her door, but this one was different, more personal, more revealing. Clara, I've been thinking about what you said, about there being room for both the past and the future. I've spent 7 years believing that loving someone new would somehow diminish what I had with Mary, like my heart was a finite space, and filling it with new feelings would crowd out the old ones. But maybe that's not how it works. Maybe the heart just expands.
makes room. I'm not saying I'm ready for everything. I'm not. There are days I can barely manage to get out of bed. Days the grief feels as fresh as if Mary and Rebecca died yesterday instead of 7 years ago. I don't know if those days will ever stop coming. But I'm saying I want to try. With you. Want to see if I can be someone besides a grieving widower, if I can remember how to smile without it feeling like betrayal, if I can look at the future and see something besides emptiness. You scare me, Clara Bennett. Scare me because caring about you feels dangerous, like inviting catastrophe. But not caring about you, pretending these feelings don't exist, that scares me more. So here I am. Terrified, but trying. Don't know what comes next, but I'm willing to find out if you are. Yours, Caleb. Clara read the letter 3 times, her vision blurring with tears. He'd signed it, yours. Not just his initial, not a formal closing, but a claim and a promise and a risk all wrapped in one word. She wrote back immediately, her hand shaking with emotion. Caleb? Yes. To all of it, yes. I'm scared too, but I'm willing to be scared with you. I'm willing to take the bad days with the good, willing to give you space when you need it and hold you when you'll let me. I'm willing to build something with you, slowly, carefully, one day at a time. You're not alone anymore, remember that. When the grief comes and the bad days hit and you feel like you're drowning, you're not alone. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Yours too, Clara. The next morning, Caleb arrived with coffee. He'd brought it instead of her making it, a reversal that made Clara smile. They drank it together in the storage room, shoulders touching, comfortable silence stretching between them. I've been thinking, Caleb said finally. The store needs a better sign. The old one's barely legible. I know. It's on my list of things to fix when I have money. I could make you one. At the ranch. Bring it down when it's finished. Clara turned to look at him, understanding what he wasn't saying. He was planning ahead. Planning to come back. Planning to keep being part of her life, part of the store, part of this thing they were building together. I'd like that, she said softly. He nodded, then reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, wrapped in cloth. This was going to be a Christmas present, but I can't wait that long. Too worried I'll lose my nerve. Clara unwrapped it carefully and found a key. Simple, iron, worn from use. What? It's to the ranch, Caleb said, not looking at her, his voice rough with emotion. To the house. In case you ever need somewhere to go, or want to see where I live, or... He trailed off, then forced himself to continue. Or if I disappear for a few days and you're worried, you can come check on me. Make sure I'm still alive. The gift was enormous. Clara understood that, understood what it meant for Caleb to give her access to his sanctuary, the place where he'd hidden from the world for 7 years. It was trust and vulnerability and a kind of intimacy that had nothing to do with physical touch. Thank you, Clara whispered, closing her hand around the key. I'll take care of it. Take care of you. I don't need Yes, you do. Clara set down her coffee and took his hand, lacing their fingers together. Everyone needs someone to care about them, Caleb, even grieving widowers who think they're better off alone. He looked at their joined hands, his expression complex. This still feels impossible, like I'm waiting for something terrible to happen. Maybe something terrible won't happen. Maybe we'll just be happy. I don't remember what that feels like. Then we'll learn together. Clara squeezed his hand. One day at a time, remember? Caleb pulled her close then, wrapping his arms around her, and Clara felt the last of his resistance crumbling. He was still afraid. She could feel it in the tension of his muscles, the way he held her just a little too tight. But he was here, choosing her, choosing them. And for now, that was enough. The key to Caleb's ranch burned in Clara's pocket for 3 days before she found the courage to use it. Not because she doubted his invitation, but because she understood what crossing that threshold meant. Entering the place where his ghosts lived, where Mary and Rebecca's presence would be strongest, where 7 years of grief had carved themselves into every corner. But on the 4th morning, when Caleb didn't arrive at the store and no letter appeared under her door, Clara knew something was wrong. She'd learned his patterns by now, learned to read the silences between his words. He was drowning in one of those bad days he'd warned her about, the days when grief felt fresh and suffocating. So Clara closed the store early, left a note on the door, borrowed Sarah Pritchard's mare, and rode north toward Eagle Ridge. The journey took nearly 3 hours, following a rutted trail that climbed steadily through scrub pine and granite outcroppings. The November wind cut through Clara's coat, and twice she questioned her decision, wondering if she was making a terrible mistake. But the image of Caleb alone in his grief, convinced he had to face it by himself, kept her moving forward. The ranch appeared suddenly around a bend, a small house built of weathered logs, a barn that had seen better days, a corral holding a single horse. Smoke rose from the chimney, so Clara knew he was there, but no one came out to greet her as she dismounted and tied the mare to the fence. Clara stood in the yard for a long moment, the key heavy in her hand, gathering her courage. Then she climbed the 3 steps to the porch and knocked. No answer. She knocked again, harder. "Caleb? It's Clara. I'm coming in." Still nothing. Clara fitted the key into the lock, her heart pounding, and pushed open the door. The interior was dim, just firelight from the hearth casting shadows across a single large room that served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting room. Caleb sat at the table, his back to the door, a bottle of whiskey in front of him and a piece of paper in his hands. He didn't turn when she entered, didn't acknowledge her presence at all. Clara closed the door quietly and approached slowly, giving him time to object. When she got close enough, she saw what he was holding. A letter, the paper so worn from handling it was nearly transparent. Even from behind, she could see his shoulders shaking. "Caleb," she said softly, "you shouldn't be here." His voice was raw, wrecked. "This is one of the bad days I told you about. You should go." "I'm not going anywhere." Clara moved around the table so she could see his face. His eyes were red-rimmed, devastated, older than they'd been 3 days ago. "What happened?" "Nothing happened. That's the problem." He set down the letter carefully, like it might shatter. "I woke up this morning and couldn't remember Rebecca's laugh. Tried for an hour, but it's just gone. And if I can't remember her laugh, what else am I forgetting? What else is slipping away while I'm busy pretending I can move on?" Clara's throat tightened. She pulled out the chair beside him and sat down, close enough to touch, but not touching, giving him space. "Tell me about her, about Rebecca." "What's the point? She's dead. Has been for 7 years. Talking about her won't bring her back." "No, but it might help you remember her laugh." Clara reached out slowly and took his hand. He didn't pull away. "I never knew my parents well enough to forget them, but I imagine if I did, I'd want someone to help me hold on to the memories. So tell me, what was she like?" Caleb stared at their joined hands, his jaw working. For a long moment, Clara thought he'd refuse. Then haltingly, he began to speak. "She was 2 years old, had Mary's blonde hair and my eyes. Loved horses. Used to stand at the corral fence for hours watching them, making up stories about where they'd go if they could run away." His voice cracked. "She called me Papa. Not Pa or Daddy, but Papa, because Mary thought it sounded refined. And her laugh, when I could remember it, it was like bells. High and clear and absolutely joyful, like the whole world was wonderful and she couldn't contain her happiness. She sounds beautiful. She was perfect." Caleb's hand tightened on Clara's. "And when she got sick, when the fever came, I wasn't even here. I was 300 miles away driving cattle because we needed the money. Mary sent letters saying Rebecca had a cold, nothing serious, but by the time the letters reached me, they were already dead. Both of them. Gone before I even knew to worry. That's not your fault. Isn't it?" He finally looked at her, and the anguish in his eyes nearly broke Clara's heart. "I chose that cattle drive, chose money over being home. If I'd been here, maybe I could have gotten the doctor faster. Maybe I could have saved them. Or maybe you would have died too," Clara interrupted firmly. "Cholera doesn't care about good intentions or love or how badly you want to save someone. It kills. That's what it does. And you being there wouldn't have changed that. You don't know that. Neither do you. But what I do know is that torturing yourself for 7 years won't bring them back. It just steals more life from you, and I don't think Mary would want that." Caleb laughed bitterly. "Everyone always says that. Mary wouldn't want you to suffer. But Mary's not here, is she? She doesn't get a say in what I do with my grief." "No, she doesn't. Clara shifted closer, her other hand joining the first, holding his hand between both of hers. But you do. You get to choose, Caleb. Keep drowning in the past or start swimming towards something new. And before you say it's betraying them, it's not. Remembering Rebecca's laugh, telling stories about her, keeping her alive in your heart while also living your own life, that's not betrayal, that's love. I'm afraid, he whispered, afraid that if I let go of the grief, even a little bit, I'll lose them completely. The pain is all I have left of them. That's not true. Clara squeezed his hand. You have memories, you have love, you have the life they would have wanted for you. The pain isn't honoring them, Caleb. It's just pain. He pulled his hand free and stood abruptly, walking to the fireplace, putting distance between them. Clara watched him stand there, shoulders rigid, fighting some internal battle she couldn't help him with. The letter I was reading, he said finally, not turning around. Mary wrote it 3 weeks before she died. She was pregnant again. We didn't know yet, but she must have suspected. She wrote about the future, about the children we'd have, about growing old together on this ranch. She was so happy, Clara, so full of plans and dreams. And I read that letter, and all I can think is that she died believing those dreams would come true. She died not knowing that everything she hoped for would turn to ash. She died loved, Clara said quietly. She died knowing her husband adored her, that her daughter was safe and cared for. In her last moments, she had that. Not the future she'd planned, but the love she'd built. That's not nothing, Caleb. He turned then, and Clara saw tears on his face, the careful control he always maintained finally cracking. I don't know how to let go. Then don't. Clara stood and crossed to him, wrapping her arms around him, holding him as he finally, truly broke. Don't let go. Just make room. Room for the grief and the love and the memories, and also room for me. Room for us. Room for whatever comes next. Caleb buried his face in her shoulder and wept. Not the quiet, controlled grief Clara had seen hints of, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook his entire body. 7 years of holding it together, of trying to be strong, of suffering alone. It all poured out of him while Clara held on, whispering reassurances she wasn't sure he could hear. When the storm finally passed, Caleb pulled back slightly, wiping his face with his sleeve. I'm sorry. You shouldn't have to see me like this. Where else would I be? Clara cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. This is what being together means, remember? The good days and the bad. Today's a bad day. I'm still here. Why? The question was barely audible. Why would you want this? Want me? Because underneath all this grief, you're a good man, a kind man. A man who saves strangers and writes letters in the dark and builds shelves for a woman he barely knows because it's the right thing to do. Clara's thumb traced his cheekbone, wiping away lingering tears. Because when you look at me, I feel seen in a way I've never felt before. Because you're worth fighting for, Caleb Rowan, even when you don't believe it yourself. He kissed her then, desperate and grateful and still a little broken, and Clara kissed him back, pouring all her certainty into it, all her determination to not let him drown alone. When they broke apart, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. Stay, please. Just for today. I don't want to be alone. Okay, Clara whispered. I'll stay. They spent the rest of the day in the quiet intimacy of shared space. Caleb showed Clara around the ranch, the barn where he kept his horse, and a few head of cattle, the garden plot where Mary had grown vegetables, now overgrown with weeds, the small cemetery on the hill where 2 graves sat side by side, marked with simple wooden crosses. Clara stood at the graves while Caleb hung back, giving her space to pay her respects. The crosses read Mary Rowan, beloved wife and mother, and Rebecca Rowan, our little angel. Simple, stark, devastating. I come up here every morning, Caleb said quietly. Tell them about my day, about what's happening in town, about you. Clara turned to look at him. You told them about me? Couldn't not tell them. You're the most important thing that's happened to me in 7 years. He moved closer, standing beside her, looking down at the graves. I told Mary you're stubborn and brave and you make terrible coffee. Told Rebecca she would have liked you, that you have kind eyes. I don't know if they can hear me, but I like to think they can. Like to think they're glad I'm not alone anymore. I think they are, Clara said, taking his hand. I think they want you to be happy. I'm not sure I remember how. Then we'll learn together, just like everything else. They walked back to the house as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Inside, Caleb cooked a simple meal, beans and bacon, bread that was slightly stale but edible, and they ate at the table where Clara had found him drowning in grief that morning. This house is so quiet, Clara observed. How do you stand it? Got used to it, I guess. The silence used to drive me crazy, kept expecting to hear Mary singing or Rebecca laughing, but eventually the silence just became normal. He looked around the room, seeing it through Clara's eyes. It's different with you here. Better. You could come to town more, Clara suggested carefully. Stay above the store sometimes. You've been doing all the repairs anyway. Might as well have a place to sleep that's closer. Are you asking me to move in with you? I'm asking you to consider not being alone all the time. There's a difference. Caleb was quiet for a long moment, considering. People would talk. People are already talking. At least this way we'd be together. Clara reached across the table and took his hand. I'm not trying to push you into something you're not ready for, but I also don't want to do this, us, in stolen moments between store repairs. I want more than that. Want you to be part of my life, not just the shadows around it. I don't know if I can live in town. Too many people, too much noise, too many memories of what it was like before. Then I'll come here sometimes. We'll figure out something that works for both of us. Clara squeezed his hand. But Caleb, I need you to meet me halfway. Can't be the only one reaching all the time. He stood abruptly and pulled her up with him, into his arms, holding her tight. You're right. You're absolutely right, and I'm sorry. I keep taking and taking. Your patience, your understanding, your help, and giving nothing back. That's not true. It is. He pulled back to look at her face. You've been carrying this whole thing, carrying me, and I've been so wrapped up in my own fear and grief that I haven't thought about what you need, what you want. I want you, Clara said simply. Broken parts and all, but I also want a partner, not a project. Want someone who's willing to try as hard as I am. Then that's what I'll be. Caleb kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Starting now, starting today. You came all the way out here because you were worried about me. You held me while I fell apart. You stood at Mary's grave and didn't run away screaming. That's more than trying, Clara. That's love, even if neither of us has said the word yet. Clara's breath caught. Is it? Yeah. His voice dropped to a whisper. It is, and I'm terrified of it, but I'm also grateful for it. Grateful for you, for being stubborn enough to not give up on me. They stood like that as darkness fell outside, wrapped in each other, something fundamental settling between them. Clara had come here expecting to comfort him, to hold him through a bad day. She hadn't expected this breakthrough, this commitment, this feeling like they'd crossed some invisible line from maybe to yes. That night, Clara slept in Caleb's bed while he took the floor, both of them understanding without discussion that they weren't ready for more. But as Clara drifted off, she heard him breathing in the darkness beside her, steady and real, and felt safer than she had in years. The next morning, they rode back to town together. Caleb didn't come inside the store, but he didn't disappear either. He tied his horse outside and stood in the street, visible, present, while Clara opened up for business. Sarah Pritchard was the first to notice, her eyes going wide when she saw Caleb standing there. Is he staying? For now, Clara said, unable to keep the smile off her face. Well, Sarah's expression softened. Well, it's about time. Over the next few weeks, Caleb's presence in town became normal. Not constant. He still needed his ranch, his solitude, his space to breathe, but regular. He came to the store several times a week, finished the sign he'd promised and hung it above the door, started taking meals with Clara in her quarters above the store. The town watched and whispered, but Caleb bore it with more grace than Clara expected. He nodded at people who greeted him, tolerated Mrs. Thornton's intrusive questions, even smiled once when Emma asked him about his horse. You're doing well, Alice Murphy told Clara one afternoon, watching Caleb repair a window frame. With him, I mean. He's more alive than I've seen him in years. He's trying, Clara said. We both are. It shows. Alice hesitated, then added, There's a harvest social next month, first one since you arrived. Will you come? Clara glanced at Caleb, remembering his words about never dancing at socials, never being normal. I don't know. That might be too much for him. Maybe. Or maybe it's exactly what he needs, to start participating in life again, not just observing from the edges. Alice touched Claire's arm. Think about it. You don't have to stay long, but it would mean something, you being there, both of you. That night, Clara mentioned the social to Caleb. They were sitting at her small table, eating the stew she'd made, comfortable in the routine they'd built. A social, Caleb repeated slowly, with dancing and music and the whole town watching. We don't have to go. Alice just thought, we should go. Clara's spoon froze halfway to her mouth. What? We should go, Caleb said again, more firmly this time. You're right. You've been meeting me more than halfway, accommodating my fears, my need for isolation, my general brokenness. The least I can do is show up at a social with you, let people see that I'm not completely lost to grief. Caleb, I don't want you to force yourself into something that makes you miserable just to prove a point. It's not about proving a point. It's about being your partner, like you asked, about not making you face everything alone. He reached across the table and took her hand. Besides, it's time. Past time, probably. I've been hiding for 7 years. Maybe it's time to stop. You're sure? No. He smiled, and Clara's heart skipped at the sight of it, not quite reaching his eyes yet, but genuine nonetheless. But I'm willing to try. For you. For us. The harvest social took place on a cold December evening in the town hall, which had been decorated with pine branches and candles. Music spilled out into the street, a fiddle, a guitar, someone singing off-key but enthusiastically. Clara wore her best dress, dark green with black trim, her hair arranged in a softer style than usual. She felt nervous, exposed, aware that walking into that hall with Caleb would announce to all of Red Hollow that they were together. Caleb met her at the store, wearing clean clothes and an expression that suggested he was heading to his execution rather than a dance. But his hand was steady when he offered it to Clara, and his voice was firm when he said, Ready? Are you? Not even a little bit. Let's go anyway. They walked to the hall together, and Clara felt every eye in town turn toward them when they entered. The music didn't stop, but conversations did. Sarah Pritchard smiled broadly. Mrs. Thornton looked scandalized. The cowboys playing cards in the corner stared openly. Clara felt Caleb tense beside her, felt him fighting the urge to turn around and walk back out. She squeezed his hand. Breathe. We don't have to stay long. No. Caleb straightened his shoulders. We're here. Might as well commit. They found seats along the wall, and slowly, conversation resumed around them. Sarah brought them cider. Alice introduced them to the new reverend, a young man who shook Caleb's hand enthusiastically and didn't mention his years of absence from services. Emma Thornton asked Clara about the store's new inventory, and through it all, Caleb stayed. Didn't run, didn't retreat into himself, just sat beside Clara and endured the attention with quiet dignity. When the fiddle player struck up a waltz, couples moved on to the dance floor. Clara watched them with longing, remembering the few times she'd danced back in Philadelphia, the brief moments of grace and beauty in otherwise gray years. Dance with me, Caleb said suddenly. Clara turned to stare at him. What? Dance with me. He stood and offered his hand, his expression nervous but determined. I'm probably terrible, haven't danced since Mary died, but I want to try. With you. Clara took his hand, her heart in her throat, and let him lead her onto the floor. He was right. He was rusty, stumbling over the steps, holding her too stiffly. But he was trying, and that meant everything. I can't believe you're doing this, Clara whispered as they turned awkwardly through the waltz. Neither can I. Caleb's grip on her waist tightened slightly. But you were right. About everything. About living instead of just surviving. About making room for the past and the future. About us. Are you saying you love me, Caleb Rowan? He missed a step, nearly tripping over her feet, then steadied himself. Yeah, I guess I am. Terrified of it. But yeah. I love you, Clara Bennett. Your stubbornness and your kindness and the way you make terrible coffee but keep trying anyway. Love how you look at me like I'm not broken, or like my brokenness doesn't matter. Love that you're patient when I run and still here when I come back. Clara felt tears pricking her eyes. I love you too. Your grief and your fear and the way you help people from the shadows because you still care even when caring hurts. Love your rare smiles and your careful hands and the letters you write in the dark. They swayed together in the middle of the dance floor, surrounded by people but lost in each other, and Clara understood that this was the moment everything changed. This was Caleb choosing life, choosing her, choosing to step out of the shadows and into the light. When the dance ended, Caleb didn't let her go immediately. He stood there holding her, his forehead resting against hers, breathing like he'd just run a race. Thank you, he whispered, for not giving up on me, for seeing something worth saving. Always, Clara whispered back. I'll always see it. See you. They left the social early, but they'd stayed long enough for Red Hollow to see that Caleb Rowan was stepping back into life, long enough to claim each other publicly, without shame or hesitation. As they walked back through the cold December night, Clara felt Caleb's hand warm in hers and knew they'd crossed another threshold. The worst was behind them. The fear, the resistance, the careful distance. What lay ahead was still uncertain, still frightening in its own way, but they'd face it together. And that made all the difference. Winter came to Red Hollow with a vengeance 3 days after the harvest social, bringing snow that turned the world white and silent. Clara woke to find the store's windows frosted over, ice crystals forming delicate patterns on the glass. She wrapped herself in a shawl and went downstairs to light the stove, her breath misting in the cold air. The letter was waiting on the counter, as it had been every morning for weeks now. But these letters were different than the early ones, warmer, more personal, filled with small observations about his day and questions about hers. Clara smiled as she unfolded it, recognizing the handwriting that had become as familiar as her own. Clara, snow's here. Roads will be bad for a few days. I'm writing in anyway because I promised to finish the new shelves, and because a day without seeing you feels wrong now. Strange how quickly you become necessary to someone's life. I'll bring firewood. Your stack out back won't last through a hard freeze. See, Clara pressed the letter to her chest, warmth spreading through her despite the cold. 4 months ago, she'd been alone in Philadelphia with nothing but a failing seamstress business and no prospects. Now she had a store that was finally profitable, a town that was beginning to feel like home, and a man who rode through snowstorms just to see her. Caleb arrived mid-morning, his horse picking its way carefully through the snow-covered street. He tied the animal under the overhang where it would be sheltered, then hauled in armloads of firewood, stacking it neatly by the back door. Snow clung to his hat and coat, melting slowly in the store's warmth. You didn't have to come in this weather, Clara said, pouring him coffee that was, she had to admit, still terrible, despite weeks of practice. Yes, I did. Caleb wrapped his hands around the cup, warming them. Roads are only going to get worse. If I didn't come today, might be a week before I could get back to town. And that would bother you? He looked at her over the rim of the cup, those blue eyes steady and sure. Yeah, it would. They worked together through the morning, Clara managing the few customers brave enough to venture out in the snow, while Caleb built shelves in the storage room. The rhythm they'd developed over the past weeks felt natural now, comfortable silences punctuated by easy conversation, hands brushing in passing, stolen kisses when no one was watching. But Clara could sense something different in Caleb today. A tension in his shoulders, a distraction in his work. Twice she caught him staring at nothing, his hand still on whatever task he'd been doing, his expression troubled. What's wrong? She finally asked, bringing him fresh coffee in the storage room. Nothing's wrong. Caleb. Clara set down the cup and touched his arm. I can tell when something's bothering you. Talk to me. He set down his hammer and turned to face her fully. It's December 9th. Clara waited, not understanding the significance. Rebecca's birthday. She would have been 9 years old today. His voice was rough, painful. And I woke up this morning, and my first thought wasn't about her. It was about you, about getting to town to see you, and then I remembered what day it was, and I felt... He stopped,
struggling with the words. I felt guilty, like I was betraying her by being happy. Clara's heart ached for him. She took his hands, holding them between her own. You're not betraying her by being happy. She was your daughter, Caleb. She'd want you to be happy. How do you know? She was 2 years old when she died. She didn't want anything except horses and peppermint sticks and for me to tell her stories at bedtime. His hands tightened on Clara's. I'm forgetting her, Clara. Little by little, she's slipping away. And now I have you, and I'm happy, and it feels like I'm leaving her behind. You're not forgetting her. You're just learning to carry her memory differently. Clara moved closer, wrapping her arms around him. Love doesn't run out, remember? Your heart made room for me. That doesn't mean there's less room for Rebecca. Then why does it feel like there is? Because grief lies to us, tells us that moving forward means abandoning the past. But that's not true. Clara pulled back to look at his face. Tell me about her birthday. What would you have done if she were alive? Caleb was quiet for a long moment, remembering. Mary would have baked a cake. Chocolate, because Rebecca loved chocolate. We would have given her presents, probably something horse-related, knowing our daughter. And at night, after she was asleep, Mary and I would have sat on the porch and talked about how fast she was growing, how soon she'd be too old for dolls and make-believe. Then let's honor that. Clara squeezed his hands. Let's close the store early. You and me will do something to remember her. Not grieve her, remember her. Celebrate who she was. How? She's been dead 7 years. There's nothing left to celebrate. There's everything left to celebrate. Clara's voice was firm. She existed, Caleb. She was loved and wanted, and she brought joy into the world for 2 years. That matters. That's worth remembering. After a moment, Caleb nodded slowly. Okay, what did you have in mind? They closed the store at noon, hanging a sign that Clara hoped wouldn't lose her too many customers. Then they bundled up against the cold and walked to the small cemetery on the hill beyond town, their boots crunching through fresh snow. Rebecca's grave looked peaceful under its white blanket. Clara stood back while Caleb knelt beside it, brushing snow from the wooden cross, his movements tender. Hey, baby girl, he said softly. Happy birthday. You'd be 9 today. Probably tall like your mama. Probably still horse crazy, knowing you. His voice cracked. I brought someone to meet you. Her name's Clara. She runs your grandfather's store now. She's special, Rebecca. I think you'd like her. Think you'd tell her stories about the horses you imagined, the adventures you made up. Clara felt tears streaming down her face, but she didn't wipe them away. This moment was sacred, private, a father introducing his living love to his dead daughter. I'm trying to be happy again, Caleb continued, trying to live instead of just surviving. It's hard, and it feels wrong sometimes, like I'm leaving you and Mama behind. But Clara says I'm not. Says there's room for all of it, the grief and the love and the memories and the future. I'm choosing to believe her. He stood slowly, snow clinging to his knees, and reached for Clara's hand. She took it, stepping forward to stand beside him at the grave. Rebecca, Clara said quietly, feeling foolish but also somehow right. I never met you, but your father talks about you. About your laugh and your imagination and how much you loved horses. I promise I'll take care of him. I'll remind him to eat when he forgets, hold him when the bad days come, love him even when he's difficult. And I promise I won't try to replace your mother. No one could do that. Caleb's hand tightened on hers, and when Clara looked at him, she saw tears on his face. But they weren't tears of anguish, not entirely. There was something else there too, something like peace. They walked back to town slowly, not talking, just being together in the quiet snow. When they reached the store, Caleb didn't go to his work in the storage room. Instead, he led Clara upstairs to her quarters and pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to the earth. Thank you, he whispered into her hair, for understanding, for not making me choose between my past and my future. You don't have to choose, Clara whispered back. You get to have both. That night, Caleb stayed, not just for dinner or an evening visit, but through the night, both of them understanding without words that something had shifted. They lay in Clara's narrow bed, fully clothed, wrapped around each other, and talked in the darkness about things they'd never shared before. Caleb told her about his childhood in Kentucky,
about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about his father who'd been hard but fair, and his mother who'd died when he was 15. He told her about meeting Mary at a church social, about how she'd laughed at his clumsy attempts at dancing and agreed to marry him anyway. He told her about Rebecca's birth, about holding his daughter for the first time and feeling his heart expand in ways he hadn't known were possible. Clara told him about her parents' death, about the foster family who'd taken her in but never quite wanted her, about working her fingers raw as a seamstress to afford a room of her own. She told him about the loneliness that had become so familiar she'd stopped noticing it, about the men who'd courted her only to lose interest when they realized she had no dowry and no connections. She told him about receiving the letter about her uncle's store and seeing it as the escape she'd been waiting for, even though she'd been terrified. "I'm glad you came," Caleb said, his hand stroking her hair in the darkness. "Glad you were stubborn enough to stay when everything was against you. Glad you wouldn't let me push you away. I'm glad you saved me, twice." Clara pressed closer to him, feeling safe in a way she'd never felt before. "I came here with nothing, expecting nothing, and instead I found everything." That's a lot of pressure on a broken-down cowboy. "You're not broken down, you're just broken in, like good leather." Clara smiled against his chest. "And you're everything I didn't know I needed." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other, and when Clara woke in the gray dawn light, Caleb was still there. Watching her sleep, his expression soft in a way she rarely saw. "Morning," she murmured. "Morning." He traced her cheekbone with one finger. "I should go. People will talk if they see my horse still here at dawn. Let them talk. I don't care anymore." "You sure about that? Once we cross this line, there's no going back. Everyone will know we're together." Clara pushed herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. "Caleb Rowan, we danced together at the Harvest Social. We've been working side by side for months. Everyone already knows we're together. The only people still pretending otherwise are us." He smiled, a real smile, wide and genuine, transforming his face. "You're right, as usual. So stay, have breakfast with me. Walk me downstairs when I open the store. Let Red Hollow see that you're not just visiting, you're staying." "I'm staying," Caleb repeated, testing the words. Then, firmer. "Yeah, I'm staying." Over the next few weeks, Caleb's presence in Clara's life became constant. He split his time between the ranch and the store, spending days in town working on improvements and nights either above the store or riding back to check on his cattle. People stopped staring, stopped whispering. Caleb and Clara became simply part of Red Hollow's landscape, as natural as the mountains beyond town. But not everyone was pleased. Clara was sweeping the store's front step one afternoon when 3 men rode up, hard-looking men with guns on their hips and trouble in their eyes. The leader, a broad-shouldered man with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, dismounted and approached her. "This Bennett's General Goods?" he asked, his voice rough as gravel. "It is. Can I help you?" "Hope so. Name's Jack Carver. These are my brothers, Tom and Sam." "We're looking for work. Ranch hand work, cattle driving, whatever's available. Thought maybe your man might know of something." Clara's hand tightened on the broom handle. Something about these men set her teeth on edge, though she couldn't say exactly what. "My man?" "Caleb Rowan. Heard he's been spending time here. Heard he used to run cattle drives before he turned hermit." Jack Carver's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Thought maybe he'd know who's hiring." "I can ask him," Clara said carefully, "but I can't promise anything." "You do that." Carver tipped his hat, the gesture somehow mocking. "We'll be at the saloon if he wants to talk. And miss? Tell him we remember him from the old days. Tell him Jack Carver's back in Montana." They rode off, leaving Clara with a sick feeling in her stomach. She found Caleb in the storage room, building yet another shelf, and told him about the visitors. The color drained from Caleb's face. "Jack Carver's here, in Red Hollow? You know him?" "Yeah, I know him." Caleb set down his tools, his hands shaking slightly. "He rode on the same cattle drives I did, back before Mary died. He was trouble then, violent, unpredictable, always picking fights. Last I heard, he'd gotten himself arrested for rustling cattle down in Wyoming. Thought he'd be in prison for years." "He's not in prison. He's at the saloon, asking about work." Clara moved closer, alarmed by Caleb's reaction. "What's wrong? Why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" "Because Jack Carver isn't here looking for work. He's here for something else." Caleb paced the small space, agitated. "The bank robbery. Back in October, when you first arrived. 3 men robbed the bank, killed the clerk, got away with $5,000. They never caught them." Clara's stomach dropped. "You think—" "I think Jack Carver was one of those men, and I think he knows I saw him." The memory came flooding back. The chaos in the street, Caleb pulling her to safety, bullets flying. Clara hadn't seen the robbers clearly, their faces hidden by bandanas. But Caleb had been in the middle of it, had been facing the street when they'd run out. "Did you see him?" Clara asked. "During the robbery?" "I don't know. Everything happened so fast and I was focused on getting you safe. But if Jack thinks I can identify him—" Caleb stopped, his expression grim. "Clara, you need to understand something. Jack Carver is dangerous. He's killed before. If he thinks I'm a threat to him, he won't hesitate to eliminate that threat. Then we tell the sheriff, right now." "And say what? That I maybe saw him during a robbery 4 months ago? That I have a feeling he was involved? That's not enough for an arrest, Clara. It's barely enough for an investigation." Caleb pulled her close, his voice urgent. "But it's enough for Jack to decide I'm too dangerous to leave alive." Fear clawed at Clara's throat. "So what do we do?" "We're careful. You don't go anywhere alone. I stay close, and we hope Jack and his brothers move on before anything happens." But Caleb's expression suggested he didn't believe that would happen. That night, Clara and Caleb sat in her quarters with the door barred, talking in low voices about what to do. Caleb wanted Clara to go to Sarah Pritchard's boarding house, somewhere with other people around, somewhere safer. Clara refused to leave the store or Caleb. "I didn't come all this way, didn't fight this hard to build a life, just to run the first time trouble shows up," Clara said stubbornly. "I'm staying. We're facing this together." "Clara, this isn't like running a store or dealing with difficult customers. This is real danger. Jack Carver has killed people. He won't think twice about killing you if you're in his way. Then don't be in his way. Don't do anything to make him think you're a threat." "I can't promise that." Caleb took her hands, his expression desperate. "If it comes down to your safety or playing it safe with Jack, I'm choosing you every time. That might mean confirming his suspicions, might mean forcing a confrontation." "Then we'll face it together," Clara repeated firmly. "I'm not running. I'm not hiding. And I'm not losing you to some violent criminal who's afraid of being identified." For 3 days, an uneasy peace held. Jack Carver and his brothers stayed at the saloon, drinking and playing cards, not causing trouble, but not leaving either. Caleb stayed at the store, working during the day but never leaving Clara alone, sleeping with his gun close at night. On the 4th day, trouble found them. Clara was closing up the store at dusk when the door opened and Jack Carver walked in, alone this time. Clara's hand moved instinctively to the counter, where Caleb had placed a pistol within easy reach. "Evening, Miss Bennett," Carver said, his smile predatory. "Hope I'm not disturbing you." "We're closed for the day." Clara kept her voice steady, her hand near the gun. "Come back tomorrow if you need supplies." "I'm not here for supplies. I'm here to talk about Caleb Rowan." "He's not here." "I know. Saw him ride out to his ranch an hour ago. That's why I came now. Wanted to talk to you private-like." Carver moved closer, and Clara forced herself not to back away. "See, I've been thinking. Caleb was awful quick to pull you out of the line of fire during that bank robbery. Almost like he knew what was about to happen. He saved my life, that's all. Maybe. Or maybe he recognized someone in the street that day. Maybe he saw something that made him nervous." Carver leaned against the counter, too close, his eyes cold. "Now, I'm not saying I was involved in any robbery, but hypothetically, if I was, and if someone could identify me, that someone would be a problem. You see where I'm going with this?" Clara's heart pounded, but she met his gaze steadily. "I see that you're threatening me." "Not threatening, just explaining the situation. See, Caleb cares about you. That's obvious to anyone with eyes. Which means if something were to happen to you, something unfortunate, he'd be real motivated to keep his mouth shut about anything he might have seen." Carver's smile widened. "Might even be motivated to leave town entirely, take his memories with him somewhere they can't hurt anybody. Get out. Clara's hand closed around the pistol grip. Get out of my store right now. Or what, you'll shoot me? Carver laughed. I don't think so, Miss Bennett. You're not the killing type. But Caleb is. He's got blood on his hands from those cattle drives, protecting the herds. He knows how to kill. That makes him dangerous. What do you want? I want Caleb Rowan to forget everything he saw that day in October. I want him to mind his own business, keep his head down, and not cause problems for anyone. And I want you to make sure that happens. Carver straightened, adjusting his gun belt. You've got 3 days to convince him. After that, my brothers and I will have to take matters into our own hands. And that would be a shame, because I'd hate to see anything happen to such a pretty little store. Be a real tragedy if it burned down. With you inside. He left before Clara could respond, the door slamming behind him. Clara stood frozen for a long moment, the pistol heavy in her hand before her legs gave out and she sank to the floor behind the counter. That's where Caleb found her 20 minutes later, having returned early from the ranch. He took one look at her face and knew something terrible had happened. Tell me, he said, kneeling beside her. Clara told him everything, Carver's threats, his demands, the 3-day deadline. By the time she finished, Caleb's expression had gone cold and hard. The gentleman she knew buried under something dangerous. He threatened you, Caleb said quietly, in your own store, made threats against your life. Caleb, what are we going to do? He stood slowly, helping Clara to her feet. We're going to the sheriff, right now, and we're going to tell him everything, my suspicions about the robbery, Carver's threats, all of it. And then I'm going to make sure you're somewhere safe while the law handles this. The sheriff's office is closed at night. Then we go to his house. This can't wait, Clara. Carver gave us 3 days, but I don't trust him to keep his word. For all we know, he's already planning to burn the store tonight. They barred the door and left through the back, moving quickly through the dark streets to Sheriff Tom McKenna's house. McKenna, a grizzled man in his 50s who'd been lawman in Red Hollow for 20 years, listened to their story with increasing concern. Jack Carver, he said when they finished. Yeah, I've heard of him. Wanted in 3 territories for various crimes. If he's here, and if he was involved in that bank robbery, we need to act fast. He looked at Caleb. You're sure you can identify him from the robbery? I'm sure I saw someone who looked like him. Can't swear it was him in court, but I'm 90% certain. Caleb's hand tightened on Clara's. But that's not the point. The point is he's threatening Clara to keep me quiet. That makes him dangerous right now, regardless of what he did in October. Agreed. McKenna stood, reaching for his gun belt. I'll round up my deputies, arrest Carver and his brothers tonight. With any luck, we'll have them in custody before dawn. What about Clara? Where can she stay that's safe? Sarah Pritchard's boarding house, McKenna suggested. I'll post a deputy there just in case. Miss Bennett, pack a bag. You're not going back to that store until this is resolved. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to refuse to leave her hard-won home, but the fear in Caleb's eyes stopped her. She nodded. I'll pack. But Caleb comes with me. Wouldn't have it any other way, Caleb said. They returned to the store under cover of darkness, Caleb checking every shadow, his hand never far from his gun. Clara packed quickly. A few clothes, her mother's cameo, her uncle's letters, the book Mary Rowan had given her. The essentials of a life that might need rebuilding if the worst happened. As she was closing her bag, gunfire erupted from the street. Caleb yanked Clara away from the window, pushing her to the floor. Stay down! More shots, closer now. The front window shattered, glass exploding across the store floor. Clara screamed, and Caleb covered her body with his own, shielding her just as he had that first day. They're not waiting 3 days, Caleb growled. Carver must have seen us go to the sheriff. What do we do? We survive. Caleb drew his pistol, his expression grim. Stay behind the counter. Don't move unless I tell you to. He positioned himself at the broken window, looking out into the street. Claire could see shapes moving in the darkness. 3 men, spreading out, surrounding the store. Jack Carver's voice called from the shadows. Last chance, Rowan. Walk away from the girl, leave town tonight, and we'll let you live. Not happening, Caleb shouted back. Then you both die. More gunfire. Bullets punched through the walls, splintered wood. sent Clara's carefully organized inventory crashing to the floor. Caleb returned fire, his shots deliberate and controlled, each one buying them a few seconds of cover. But Clara knew they couldn't win this fight. 3 men against 1, trapped in a building, running out of ammunition. The math was simple and brutal. Then she heard something else. More gunfire, but from a different direction. Shouts. Men yelling. The sound of horses approaching fast. Sheriff McKenna's voice rang out, "Drop your weapons! You're surrounded!" The next few minutes were chaos. More shooting, men running, the sheriff's deputies closing in. Clara stayed behind the counter where Caleb had told her to, her hands over her ears, praying to anything that would listen, that Caleb wouldn't be hit. Finally, silence fell. Caleb lowered his gun slowly, then turned to Clara. "Stay there. Let me make sure it's safe." He moved to the door carefully, gun raised, then relaxed. "It's over. McKenna got them." Clara stood on shaking legs and stumbled to the window. In the street, illuminated by torches, Jack Carver and his brothers were being shackled by deputies. Carver's arm was bleeding and Sam was unconscious, but they were alive. Arrested. McKenna approached the store, holstering his weapon. "Everyone all right in there?" "We're fine," Caleb called back. Damage to the store, but we're fine." "Good. We'll need statements from both of you, but that can wait until morning. For now, get somewhere safe. I've got men watching these 3. They're not going anywhere except a cell." Clara looked at her store. Windows shattered, walls riddled with bullet holes. Inventory destroyed. All the work she'd done, all the progress she'd made, damaged in minutes. She felt tears burning her eyes but refused to let them fall. Caleb wrapped his arms around her from behind, holding her steady. "We'll fix it," he murmured, "all of it. The windows, the walls, everything. I promise." "What if they come back? What if there are more of them?" "There aren't, and even if there were, I wouldn't let them touch you." He turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face. "Clara, listen to me. I will always protect you. Always, even if it costs me everything." "It almost did cost you everything." Clara's voice broke. "You could have been killed, Caleb, because of me, because you wouldn't abandon me." "Because I love you," Caleb interrupted firmly. "Because you're worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth everything." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I've lost people I loved before. I'm not losing you too. Not now, not ever." Clara clung to him, letting herself shake, letting the fear finally surface now that the danger had passed. They stood like that in the ruined store, wrapped in each other, survivors of another battle. "Marry me," Caleb said suddenly. Clara pulled back to stare at him. "What?" "Marry me." He said it again, louder, more certain. "I know it's not romantic, proposing in a shot-up store with deputies carting criminals away outside. But I almost lost you tonight, Clara. Almost watched you die because of my past, my choices, my inability to just forget things. And all I could think while bullets were flying was that I wanted more time with you. Wanted a lifetime with you. Wanted to stop wasting days being afraid and just claim what we have. Caleb, I love you. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you refuse to give up on anything, including me. I love how you make terrible coffee and still bring it to me every morning. I love that you rode out to my ranch alone because you were worried about me. I love that you stood up to Jack Carver, that you wouldn't leave your store even when I begged you to." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Marry me, Clara. Let me spend whatever time I have left making you happy." Clara felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. "Yes. Yes, of course, yes." Caleb kissed her then, deep and desperate and full of promises, while outside the deputies led away the men who'd tried to destroy them. And Clara understood that this was what she'd been searching for all her life. Not safety or comfort or an easy path, but this. Love that was worth fighting for. Love that survived bullets and grief and fear. Love that chose to stay even when leaving would be easier. They'd build a life together, repair the store, make a home, face whatever came next as partners. And it would be enough. More than enough. It would be everything. They spent that night at Sarah Pritchard's boarding house, neither of them able to sleep despite exhaustion pulling at their bones. Clara lay in the narrow guest bed while Caleb sat in the chair beside her, his gun within reach, watching the window as if Jack Carver might materialize from the darkness, despite being locked in the sheriff's cell. "You should rest," Clara whispered sometime past midnight. "Can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see you on that floor with bullets flying." His hand found hers in the darkness. "See you dying because I couldn't protect you fast enough." "But I didn't die. We're both here. We're safe." This time, Caleb's voice was rough with emotion. "But what about next time? What if there's someone else from my past, someone else who sees me as a threat? What if my trying to be happy just puts you in danger over and over?" Clara sat up, reaching for him in the darkness. "Caleb Rowan, don't you dare. Don't you dare use this as an excuse to push me away." "I'm not." "You are. I can hear it in your voice. You're already building walls, already convincing yourself that loving me is dangerous, that I'd be safer without you." She found his face, cupped it between her hands. "But I wouldn't be safer. I'd just be alone. And I've been alone long enough." "Clara, you asked me to marry you. In a bullet-riddled store with criminals being arrested outside, you asked me to marry you. And I said yes. Did you mean it, or were you just caught up in the moment?" "I meant it." The words came quickly, fervently. "Every word." "Then stop trying to protect me by leaving. The only way you can protect me is by staying." Clara pulled him closer until their foreheads touched. "We survived tonight because we were together, because you were there, fighting for me, and I was there, trusting you. That's how this works, Caleb. We face the danger together, or we don't face it at all." He kissed her then, soft and gentle and full of surrender. "You're right. You're always right. Remember that when we're married, and I remind you to eat vegetables." Despite everything, Caleb laughed. Actually laughed. The sound rusty but real. "Deal." They dozed fitfully until dawn, then returned to the store to assess the damage in daylight. It looked worse than Clara remembered. Windows shattered, walls pocked with bullet holes, merchandise destroyed, years of careful work undone in minutes of violence. But the structure was sound. The roof Caleb had repaired held firm. The shelves he'd built stood straight. The foundation, both literal and metaphorical, remained intact. "We can fix this," Caleb said, surveying the destruction. "It'll take time and money, but we can fix it." "How much time? How much money?" Clara felt despair creeping in despite her determination. "I've barely been profitable for a month. I don't have savings for this kind of repair." "Then we'll get creative." Caleb wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "I've got some money saved, not much, but enough to order new windows. And I can do most of the repair work myself. That's free except for materials." "We'll make it work, Clara, just like we've made everything else work." Sarah Pritchard arrived an hour later with breakfast and an offer that made Clara's throat tight. "The women of Red Hollow want to help. We're organizing a work party. Everyone contributes what they can. Mrs. Chen's got fabric for new curtains. Emma Thornton's father will donate lumber. Alice Murphy's rounded up volunteers to help clean and rebuild." Sarah squeezed Clara's hand. "You're one of us now. We take care of our own." Over the next 2 weeks, Red Hollow came together in a way Clara had never experienced. Men arrived with tools and lumber, repairing walls and building new display cases. Women brought food and cleaning supplies, scrubbing blood and gunpowder residue from the floors. Even the cowboys who'd been wary of Clara in those early days showed up, replacing windows and reinforcing the doorframe. Caleb worked from dawn until long after dark, his hands blistered and his back aching, but his expression peaceful in a way Clara had rarely seen. He joked with the other men, accepted their ribbing about his upcoming marriage with good grace, slowly reintegrating into the community he'd abandoned 7 years ago. "It's good to see you back among the living," old Tom Brewster said one afternoon, hammering nails beside Caleb. "Been too long, son." "Yeah," Caleb agreed quietly. "It has been." Clara watched from the doorway, her heart full. This was what community meant. Not just people living near each other, but people choosing to help, to show up, to rebuild together what violence had torn down. On the third day of repairs, Sheriff McKenna stopped by with news. Jack Carver and his brothers are being transferred to Helena for trial. Confessed to the bank robbery and 3 others across Montana. They'll hang, most likely. He looked at Caleb seriously. "Your testimony was crucial. Thank you for being willing to come forward." "Will there be retaliation?" Clara asked, fear spiking. From other gang members? Not likely. The Carver brothers worked alone, and they weren't well liked even among criminals. You should be safe. McKenna tipped his hat. But if you're worried, I can keep a deputy posted nearby for a few weeks. That won't be necessary, Caleb said, his arm coming around Clara's waist. I'll be here, and I'm not going anywhere. After McKenna left, Clara leaned into Caleb's embrace. You meant that, didn't you? About not going anywhere. Yeah, I'm done running, done hiding. This is home now. You're home. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't burn down the rebuilt store with your terrible cooking. I don't cook in the store. Give it time. You'll find a way. By Christmas week, the store was not just repaired, but improved. New windows let in more light. Reinforced walls provided better insulation. The display cases Caleb had built were more attractive than the old ones. And Clara's inventory, painstakingly reordered and organized with help from Alice Murphy, looked professional and inviting. It's beautiful, Clara whispered, standing in the doorway on Christmas Eve, looking at what they'd built together. Better than before. Like us, Caleb said from behind her. Broken, repaired, stronger at the damaged places. They were married on New Year's Day, in a simple ceremony at the town hall with half of Red Hollow in attendance. Clara wore her mother's cameo and a new dress that Mrs. Chen had sewn as a wedding gift. Ivory wool with delicate embroidery, beautiful and practical in equal measure. Caleb wore his best shirt and the expression of a man who couldn't quite believe his good fortune. The ceremony was brief, the vows traditional, but when Caleb slipped a simple gold band onto Clara's finger, she felt the weight of everything they'd survived to reach this moment. The bullets and grief, the fear and loneliness, the slow, painful work of learning to trust again. All of it had led here, to this man and this life and this choice they were making together. I love you, Caleb whispered as they kissed to seal their marriage, his voice thick with emotion. My brave, stubborn wife. I love you too, Clara whispered back. My broken, beautiful husband. The reception that followed was loud and chaotic and exactly right. Someone played fiddle while couples danced. Sarah Pritchard had organized a feast that covered 3 tables. Emma Thornton caught the bouquet and blushed furiously when the new schoolteacher smiled at her. And through it all, Caleb and Clara stood together, his arm around her waist, her hand in his, neither quite able to believe they were allowed to be this happy. Did you ever imagine this? Clara asked as they danced, her head on his shoulder. That day you pulled me out of the line of fire. Did you ever think we'd end up here? No, I thought I'd save you, disappear back to my ranch, and that would be the end of it. Caleb's hand tightened on her waist. Thought I was done with happiness, done with connection, done with everything except surviving. And then you wouldn't let me disappear. Wouldn't accept the distance I tried to maintain, just kept pushing and refusing to give up until I had no choice but to let you in. Sorry about that. Don't be. Best thing that ever happened to me was you being too stubborn to take no for an answer. They spent their wedding night in the quarters above the store, the same space where Clara had read Caleb's letters by lamplight, where they drunk terrible coffee and slowly learned each other's hearts. It felt right, starting their marriage here, where their story had begun. Are you nervous? Caleb asked as they climbed the stairs hand in hand. Terrified, Claire admitted, but also happy. Is that strange? No. He pulled her close once they were inside, his hands gentle on her face. It's perfect. We're allowed to be both, scared and happy, uncertain and sure, all at the same time. That's what being human means. Being human with you is better than being anything alone. They made love slowly, carefully, both aware that this was new territory requiring patience and trust. Caleb was gentle, attentive, making sure Clara felt safe every moment. And Clara, who'd spent so many years alone and untouched, learned that intimacy could be beautiful when it was built on love rather than obligation. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, Caleb tracing patterns on Clara's shoulder while she listened to his heartbeat. I need to tell you something, Caleb said quietly. About Mary. Clara stilled, then forced herself to relax. Okay. I loved her. I'll always love her. She was my first wife, the mother of my daughter, and losing her nearly destroyed me. His hand tightened on Clara's shoulder. But what I feel for you isn't less than what I felt for Mary. It's just different. Mary and I grew up together, built a life from nothing, learned how to be adults side by side. You and I, we came together already broken, already shaped by loss. We chose each other knowing exactly how much it could hurt if we lost each other again. And that makes it stronger, Clara said softly.
Because we're choosing love despite knowing the cost. Exactly. Caleb shifted so he could see her face in the moonlight. I wanted you to know that. Wanted you to understand that I'm not settling for second best or trying to replace Mary with you. You're not a replacement, Clara. You're a new beginning. Thank you for telling me. Clara kissed him gently. I needed to hear that. There's something else. Caleb hesitated, then continued. I want to take you to the ranch tomorrow. Want to show you Mary and Rebecca's graves properly, introduce you to them as my wife. I want them to be part of our life, not hidden away like shameful secrets. I'd like that, Clara said, meaning it. They're part of your story, which means they're part of ours now. They rode to the ranch the next morning, the January air cold enough to burn their lungs, but the sky clear and blue. The ranch looked different to Clara this time. Not a place of grief and isolation, but a working property that needed attention and care. I've been thinking, Caleb said as they stood at the graves on the hill, about selling the ranch, moving to town permanently, being closer to the store, to you. Don't, Claire took his hand. This place is important. It's where you built your first life, where Mary and Rebecca are buried. We shouldn't abandon it. But running both the ranch and the store, we'll figure it out. Maybe we split time, a few days here, a few days in town. Maybe we hire someone to help manage the cattle. But we don't sell, Caleb. This place is part of you, and I married all of you, including your past. Caleb looked at her with such love it almost hurt. How did I get so lucky? You saved my life, twice. And then you kept saving it with letters in the dark and shelves built with care and patience when I wanted to run away from everything. Clara leaned against him. We saved each other, I think. That's the real story. They developed a rhythm over the following months. 3 days at the ranch, 4 days in town, the pattern flexible enough to adapt to whatever life required. Clara learned to love the ranch's silence, the way mountains framed every window, the small cemetery on the hill where she left wildflowers each visit. Caleb learned to love the store's controlled chaos, the satisfaction of a profitable day, the way Clara's face lit up when a long-awaited shipment arrived. But the true test came in April, when Clara realized she was pregnant. She sat on the bed in their ranch house bedroom, staring at the signs her body had been showing for weeks, the missed monthly courses, the morning nausea, the exhaustion that pulled at her by mid-afternoon. She should have been joyful, should have been excited. Instead, she felt terror gripping her heart. What if something went wrong? What if she died like Mary had, leaving Caleb to face that loss again? What if the baby died, and they had to bury another small grave on the hill? Caleb found her sitting there, tears streaming down her face, and understood immediately. Clara, are you? I'm pregnant, she whispered, and I'm terrified. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her while she shook. It's okay. We'll get through this. What if I die? What if something happens like it did with Mary? It won't. You can't promise that. Childbirth kills women all the time, especially out here where doctors are scarce and… Clara. Caleb cupped her face, forcing her to look at him. Listen to me. Yes, childbirth is dangerous. Yes, things can go wrong, but we're going to do everything possible to make sure they don't. We'll find the best doctor in Montana. We'll have Sarah Pritchard and Alice Murphy there to help. And I'll be right beside you every moment, fighting for you, just like I did when those bullets were flying. You're not scared? I'm terrified, he admitted. Terrified of losing you, terrified of losing another child, terrified of everything that could go wrong. But I'm also hopeful. Hopeful that we get to bring a life into this world together. Hopeful that I get to be a father again, to have another chance at the joy Rebecca brought me. Can we be both? Scared and hopeful at the same time? Clara thought about that, about how their entire relationship had been built on being multiple things at once, broken and healing, afraid and brave, grieving and loving. Yeah,
We can be both. Then that's what we'll be. Together. They told Red Hollow the news carefully, aware that everyone would remember what had happened to Mary. But instead of fear, Clara found support. Sarah Pritchard immediately appointed herself Clara's guardian, showing up with tonic for nausea and advice about resting. Alice Murphy brought books on childbirth and child-rearing. Mrs. Chen sewed baby clothes. Even gruff Tom Brewster, who still owed Clara money, brought a hand-carved cradle. "For the little one," he said gruffly. "Figured you'd need it." As Clara's belly grew through summer and into fall, Caleb became increasingly protective. He wouldn't let her lift anything heavy, insisted she rest every afternoon, rode to Helena himself to find the best doctor willing to come to Red Hollow for the birth. "You're being ridiculous," Clara told him one evening in September, watching him rearrange the store inventory so nothing required her to reach high shelves. "I'm pregnant, not dying." "I know, He stopped, hands on a crate of supplies. "I can't lose you, Clara. I've lost too much already. And if being overprotective is what it takes to keep you safe, then I'm going to be the most overprotective husband in Montana." "That's sweet, but also slightly annoying." Clara waddled over to him. She'd reached the stage where walking normally was impossible. "I need you to trust that I'm strong enough for this, that we're going to be okay." "I'm trying." "Try harder." But she softened the words with a kiss. "And maybe stop rearranging the store every week. The customers are getting confused." Labor came on a cold November morning, exactly 1 year after Clara had first held the key to Caleb's ranch in her palm. The pains started before dawn, and by the time the sun rose, Clara was gripping Sarah Pritchard's hand and trying not to scream. "It's normal," Sarah kept saying. "Everything's normal. The doctor's on his way. Just breathe." Caleb paced outside the bedroom like a caged animal, his face gray with fear. Alice Murphy finally grabbed him by the shoulders.
"She's going to be fine. Women do this every day. Clara's strong. She'll get through it." "Mary was strong too," Caleb said hollowly. "And she died." "Mary had cholera. Clara doesn't. Clara has a good doctor, experienced women helping her, and you right here fighting for her. It's different, Caleb. Trust that." But trust was hard when Clara's screams echoed through the building, when hours passed with no progress, when the doctor's expression grew concerned. Caleb finally pushed past Sarah into the bedroom, ignoring protests, and went to Clara's side. "I'm here," he said, taking her hand. "I'm right here." "Caleb?" Clara's voice was weak, exhausted. "Promise me, if something goes wrong, promise you'll take care of the baby." "Nothing's going wrong." "Promise me." "I promise. But you're going to be fine. You're going to hold our baby, and we're going to raise this child together, and you're going to live to be 90 years old and die in your sleep surrounded by grandchildren." His voice broke. "You're not leaving me, Clara. I won't let you." "That's not—" Another contraction cut off her words, and Clara screamed, squeezing Caleb's hand hard enough to bruise. The doctor worked quickly, efficiently, and finally, a baby's cry split the air, small and furious and alive. "It's a boy," the doctor announced, wrapping the infant in a clean blanket. "Healthy boy with good lungs." "Clara?" Caleb's eyes were still on his wife, watching her face for signs of distress. "Clara, talk to me." "I'm okay," she whispered. "Tired, but okay. Can I see him?" The doctor placed the baby in Clara's arms, and Caleb watched his wife's face transform with wonder. The baby was tiny, red-faced, perfect. He had Clara's dark hair and, when he opened his eyes briefly, Caleb's blue eyes. "He's beautiful," Clara whispered. "Caleb, we made something beautiful." Caleb sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around Clara, one finger traced gently over the baby's impossibly small hand. "Yeah, we did." "What should we name him?" Caleb thought for a long moment. "George, after your uncle, the man who brought you to Red Hollow and gave us a chance to find each other." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "George Rowan, I love it." They stayed like that while the doctor finished his work and Sarah cleaned up, while Alice brought fresh linens and Mrs. Chen arrived with soup. Just the three of them, Clara and Caleb and baby George, a family built from grief and loneliness and the stubborn refusal to give up on love. Over the next weeks,
Caleb discovered that fatherhood the second time was both easier and harder. Easier because he remembered the basics: how to change diapers, how to soothe a crying baby, how to function on almost no sleep. Harder because every milestone reminded him of Rebecca, of what he'd lost, of the daughter who never got to grow up. But Clara helped him through it, just as he'd helped her through her fears. They talked about Rebecca often now, told George stories about his sister he'd never meet, made sure the past stayed alive while building their future. "Do you think she'd like him?" Caleb asked one night, rocking George while Clara tried to sleep. Do you think she'd be happy she has a brother?" "I think she'd love him," Clara said from the bed. "And I think she'd be proud of you for being brave enough to try again, for choosing love even though you knew how much it could hurt. Some days I still can't believe this is real, that I have you, have George, have a life again instead of just existence." "Believe it." Clara reached for his hand. "This is real. We're real. And we're going to be okay." The years that followed were full in the way lives should be. Busy and chaotic and occasionally difficult, but rich with love. The store thrived under Clara's management, becoming the most successful business in Red Hollow. Caleb split his time between the ranch and the store, eventually hiring a young cowboy named Jack Morrison to help manage the cattle. They had 2 more children, a daughter they named Mary Rebecca, called Molly to distinguish her from the aunt she was named for, and another son they named Thomas after Caleb's father. The quarters above the store became too small, so they built a proper house on land between the town and the ranch, a place where all their worlds could coexist. George grew tall and strong, with his mother's stubbornness and his father's quiet competence. He loved horses like his sister Rebecca had, and Caleb taught him to ride on the same trails where he'd once ridden alone with his grief. Molly was bright and talkative, keeping everyone entertained with her endless questions and observations. She looked like Mary, Clara's mother-in-law, whom she'd never meet, and sometimes Caleb would see his daughter laugh and be transported back to happier times. Thomas was the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over conflicts and found compromise. He loved the store, loved helping his mother with inventory and talking to customers, and Clara knew he'd probably take over the business someday. On their 10th anniversary, Caleb and Clara rode up to the cemetery on the hill where Mary and Rebecca were buried. They brought wildflowers, as they did every visit, and stood hand in hand looking at the graves. "I still talk to them," Caleb admitted. "Tell them about the kids, about how the store's doing, about how you burned dinner last week trying a new recipe." "I didn't burn it. It was just a little charred." "Clara, the smoke cleared out half the town." She laughed, leaning against him. "Do you think they mind? That you're happy with someone else?" "No. I think they're glad I found you. Glad I didn't spend the rest of my life alone and grieving." Caleb wrapped both arms around her. "I think Mary would like you, would appreciate how you don't let me wallow, how you push me to be better than I think I can be. And Rebecca would love having siblings, having a house full of noise and chaos instead of just ghosts." "I hope so." Clara looked at the graves, at the wooden crosses they'd replaced with stone markers years ago. "I hope they know we haven't forgotten them, that they're still part of our family, even though they're not here." "They know." Caleb kissed the top of Clara's head. "And they're proud of us. I'm sure of it." As Red Hollow grew and changed over the years, Caleb and Clara became fixtures in the community, the couple who'd survived tragedy and violence, who'd chosen each other despite every reason not to, who'd built something beautiful from broken pieces. People told their story to newcomers, embellishing it slightly each time until it became legend. The cowboy who rode into town each day, leaving letters for the woman he loved in secret. The Eastern girl who refused to give up on a dying store or a broken man. The bullets and grief, the fear and courage, the slow, painful work of healing. But Caleb and Clara knew the real story was simpler and more complex than legend allowed. It wasn't about dramatic gestures or perfect love. It was about showing up every day, about writing letters when words were too hard to speak aloud, about building shelves and fixing roofs and holding each other through bad days, about making room in a wounded heart for new love without forgetting old losses. It was about choosing over and over to try. On a warm evening in late summer, 23 years after Clara had first arrived in Red Hollow, she stood on the porch of their house watching the sun set over the mountains. Caleb came up behind her, his hair gray now, his face lined with years of living, but his blue eyes still clear and bright.
"What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her waist. "About that first day, when you saved me from the bank robbers." Clara leaned back against him. "Did you have any idea what you were starting when you threw yourself in front of those bullets?" "Not a clue. I just saw someone who needed saving and acted." He paused. "No, that's not entirely true. I saw you standing there, frozen, about to die, and something in me woke up. For the first time in 7 years, I felt something besides grief. I felt like maybe there was still a reason to be alive." "And the letters, when did you decide to start writing them?" "The night after the robbery. I couldn't sleep, kept thinking about you trying to run that store alone with no help. And I realized I could help, could offer advice without risking connection, could do something good without having to face the danger of caring." Caleb tightened his arms around her. "Didn't work out the way I planned." "No." Clara smiled. "It worked out better." Inside the house, they could hear their children, grown now but home for a visit, laughing over some shared joke. George's voice, deep and steady. Molly's higher tones. Thomas mediating as always, the sounds of family, of life continuing, of love multiplying instead of diminishing. "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked quietly. "Letting me in? Choosing this life instead of the solitude you'd planned?" "Never." Caleb turned her in his arms so he could see her face. "Not once, not even on the hardest days. You gave me back my life, Clara. Gave me a reason to keep living instead of just surviving, gave me children and laughter and a future I'd stopped believing in. You gave me the same things, a home, a family, a man who sees me as more than I see myself." Clara touched his face, tracing the familiar lines. "We saved each other." "We did." He kissed her softly. "Best decision I ever made was getting on that horse and riding into town each morning to leave you letters. Second best was stopping the letters and showing up in person. And the third best? Marrying you. Definitely marrying you." They stood like that as twilight deepened into night, as stars appeared overhead, as the mountains turned into dark silhouettes against the sky. Inside, their children called them to dinner, voices full of warmth and belonging. Clara took Caleb's hand and led him toward the house, toward the life they'd built from letters written in darkness and love chosen despite fear. The journey from that chaotic October day to this peaceful evening had been long and sometimes painful, marked by loss and grief and hard-won joy. But they'd made it, together, and that made every difficult step worth taking. As they reached the door, Caleb pulled Clara back for one more kiss. "Thank you," he whispered, "for being stubborn enough to not let me disappear, for fighting for us when I was too scared to fight for myself. Thank you for writing those letters, for seeing me when I felt invisible, for being brave enough to try again." Clara smiled up at him. "For riding into town each day, even when it scared you." "Always," Caleb promised. "I'll always ride into town for you." And he did. For the rest of their lives, through decades of marriage and raising children and building something that outlasted both of them, Caleb kept that promise. Not with letters anymore. They lived together now, no need for shadows and secrecy, but with presence, with showing up, with choosing her every day, over and over. The letters had started their story, those words written in darkness by a broken man trying to help without risking his heart. But what they'd built together, the store and the ranch and the family and the love, that was written in sunlight, in shared work and shared laughter and shared tears, in the ordinary moments that made a life. Years later, when both Caleb and Clara were gone and their children sorted through their belongings, they found a wooden box tucked away in the attic. Inside were all the letters, every single one Caleb had written, every one Clara had written back. Yellowed with age, the ink fading, but the words still clear. Words of advice and comfort, words of fear and hope. Words of two broken people learning to trust again, learning to love again. Learning that healing didn't mean forgetting and moving forward, didn't mean leaving the past behind. Their children read the letters together, tears streaming down their faces, understanding for the first time the full story of how their parents had found each other.
Understanding that love wasn't just the easy moments or the grand gestures, it was the daily choice to show up, to try, to write one more letter, ride one more mile, build one more shelf, hold on through one more difficult day. George, now gray-haired himself with children of his own, held up the first letter his father had written. "The leak in your roof is above the back corner," he read aloud. "Patch it before the next rain, or you'll lose half your inventory." "So practical," Molly said, smiling through tears. "So like Papa." "But also so caring," Thomas added. He could have ignored Mama's struggle, could have stayed hidden at the ranch. But he chose to help, chose to reach out even when it scared him. They bundled the letters carefully, preserving them for future generations. A love story written in darkness and brought into light. A testament to the power of choosing connection over isolation, of choosing hope over fear, of choosing to try even when failure seemed certain. And in Red Hollow, where the store still stood after all these years, now run by Thomas and his children, people still told the story. Of the cowboy who rode into town each day, leaving letters for a woman he loved in secret. Of the stubborn Eastern girl who refused to accept help from shadows. Of bullets survived and grief transformed and love that conquered fear. The details changed with each telling, became embellished and mythologized. But the heart of the story remained true. Two broken people found each other in a dying town at the edge of nowhere, found healing in each other's wounds, found strength in each other's weakness, found love in the last place either expected to find it, and they built something that lasted, something that mattered, something that proved that it's never too late to start living, never too late to choose love, never too late to believe in the possibility of happiness after loss. All because a cowboy chose to write a letter instead of walking away. All because a woman chose to push when told to let go. All because two people, scared and scarred and certain they were too broken to be fixed, decided to try anyway. That was the real story. That was what mattered. Not the grand gestures or the dramatic moments, but the daily choice to show up for each other. The letters written in darkness that led them both into light. And in the end, that choice changed everything.